Hello, beautiful people. It is good to see you. Thank you for joining me. My God, we've spent a lot of time together in the past week. Shout out to everybody who was able to join the live last night on We Are Deciphered with Skip and Moni. That was a good old time. And now we are back as promised for another episode of Conversations for the Culture. And we have a very special guest indeed. I am joined by the fantastic Mr. Foxwell. I've been waiting for weeks to be able to say that.
You're officially the first person to use that
Am
pun.
I?
I feel
Oh
so
my gosh.
complimented.
Oh my gosh. I was thinking about it this morning when I was getting ready. I was like, I wonder if he's ever heard this one before.
No, I legitimately haven't. I can see people wanting to say it, or maybe that's just me hallucinating because I want to be compared to the Wes Anderson film, The Fantastic Mr. Fox,
Yes.
and the correlating children's book, but no one ever
Yes.
uses it.
Well, it's officially canon here on this channel. So, y'all, let me tell you, this is gonna start deep, and then we gonna reel back, and then we gonna get back into the deep, okay? Because I feel like I want to explain to y'all how it is that we came to meet, which is kind of on the heavier side. Then I'm gonna reel it back, and then we gonna get into some topics, okay? So the reason why ultimately Mr. Foxwell is here with us today is because what happened with the murder of Charlie Kirk was very similar to what happened when the Drake and Kendrick beef went down, which is that the people were reminded that they actually control the algorithm. When the Kendrick and Drake beef happened on social media, particularly here on YouTube, new or less known voices that were already on YouTube started to rise in the algorithm of people who want to have deeper and more nuanced conversation about the thing. I mean, yes, we do love to kick his back in every once in a while, but at the same time, we have deep and nuanced conversation about the thing. And it really changed the landscape for social media, but the people powered, the culture powered media conversation about the beef and what was the beef really about and how are we all impacted by it. And that's exactly why this channel exists today and the reason in the way that it does. It's why our friends over at Deciphered, Skip and Moni, excuse me, Skip and DJ have, continued to grow their channel. Why Moni is having, well, Moni's just Moni, but Moni having, kind of the success and new eyes, right? And new perspectives coming to it. And y'all, when the Charlie Kirk, as I shared with many of you before, when the Charlie Kirk murder happened, social media changed like on a dime. It was really instant that voices that were either already out there or weren't on social media came to social media to talk about everything behind the bullets, everything behind the act, the culture, the people, the history. And so I was just starting to engage with TikTok really just a couple weeks before Charlie Kirk was murdered. And I hadn't seen you. I hadn't seen a bunch of people that I now follow and watch faithfully. But you were one of the voices that the algorithm, pushed in front of my face. And as I shared with you when we spoke privately, some Black folks circled up and said, "You see that Mr. Foxwell over there? He sounds like he knows what he's talking about. Wouldn't it be nice if one of us could Red Rover on over there and see if we could get him to come and talk to us?" Right? Because there's this kind of uh, polarized, this isn't about Black folks. It doesn't have anything to do with us kind of perspective of people being like, oh, that's white people's problems. Don't worry about it, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's people like me who are like, I didn't say get off the couch, but I said you need to know what it is that you're talking about. or what's going on in the world. And then I realized, well, I don't know. I don't know. There's a point at which the conversation lost me, where English language and words ceased to make sense. What is a groiper? Is Doja Cat one? No, she's not. What is this and that? What is trans maxing versus being trans, right? And so when I started to say, I'm going to have the patience and I'm going to take the time to learn to read and most importantly to listen to other people, then things really did start to like slot into place in my mind of just click, 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 click. And so initially I came at the situation super type A, right? I'm going to have some guests on. We're going to have a conversation and we're just going to lay this out from A to Z for people. It's going to be super, super simple. And then you and I got together and we talked. I sent out, an interview request to Mr. Foxwell and a couple other people, and Mr. Foxwell was the one that said yes, and the one that I really wanted to talk to. There are a couple other people that I really want to talk to, but they don't want to come off TikTok. They have strong feelings about YouTube, and they don't want to do that. So I respect that. But one of the things was that, we all need to be talking to each other and show that talking to each other is possible in real conversation, not mocked up BS debate. And also that when we actually got into talking, we talked about so much that within the first 15 minutes, I was like, well, that's out the window. And which is fine for me because as the chat knows, I love an organic process. And so that was fine for me. But then obviously when we got into the conversation, as I shared with you, I was like, what if we were to talk about this? And what if we were to talk about that? And just start the conversation, see where it goes, continue the conversation for as long as we feel like we want to or need to, not necessarily today, but tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. So that is how that's my very long roundabout, just so the chat knows, because I've been like, we gonna have a guest, but I haven't said who, and I just really wanted to wait on that. So I will stop for a second so you can make whatever whatever intro remarks you want to make, and then I just have some kind of boilerplate questions to get us started.
All right. Well, I mean, I feel like I've already been fantastically introduced. So I'm Mr. Foxwell over on TikTok and on here. Originally, I had really just wanted to use both the YouTube and TikTok as a place for my fiction writing. And the comics that I make, because I've always liked writing and making comics. But when the Charlie Kirk incident happened, it sort of resurrected from the grave this old area of study that I wanted to get a PhD in. So when I was in college, I had an emphasis in writing, and specifically an emphasis in like literary studies, literacy, and education. I had originally wanted to be a teacher, so I was going for a master's PhD, a master's in education, and then for the area of study, it would have been probably a sociocultural or a sociolinguistic specialization in memes and fringe extreme pipelines, and how the literacy crisis plays directly into the radicalization and indoctrination process of these pipelines. But the area would have been really a focus on memes and how memes operate linguistically to really shift our perceptions and our sense of reality overall. I was a little bit early. So when I had submitted for this, it would have been the end of 2012, beginning of 2013. So a whole year or two before Isla Vista even happened. And for those in the chat who might not remember or be familiar with Isla Vista, this was when I don't know what I am allowed to say on YouTube, actually. Should I do the self-censoring like I do on TikTok, or just
No,
blurt it out?
just go ahead and say it.
But it would have been it would have been our first black pilled mass shooting incident. So Elliot Rodger, basically in Southern California, attacked indiscriminately both men and women that he perceived to be Chads and Beckys. He was thoroughly red pilled, but what a lot of people don't know is he was actually at the very end of the red pill pipeline, which is the black pill. Black pill, or BP, is also becoming more mainstream and more popular on TikTok. So the red pill rhetoric and BP rhetoric is starting to become more normalized, which is very concerning because black pill, the end of the black pill, the end of the red pill pipeline into the black pill is either hurting yourself or hurting as many other people as you can before you harm yourself. And that was Elliot Rodger. Elliot Rodger was kind of officially our first incel terrorist. And I had submitted for this area of research a whole year or two before that. So the internet and memes were not really considered appropriate or prestigious areas of study. So I was hoping to be accepted, but I acknowledged completely that with my lack of research experience as an individual and also the very niche area of study I wanted to go into, it would be very likely that I got rejected. So I forgot about all of that. I went into tech, particularly in content strategy and algorithm. So algorithm structure, algorithm management, and algorithm strategy. So I was one of the people trying to figure out how to keep you on an app for as long as possible, spending as much money as possible. So my research carried over into this field. So, my research in regards to what happened with Charlie Kirk and some of, how memes and incel rhetoric and red pill logic are kind of bubbling up into the mainstream, that never stopped. And it's wild because it is kind of like I buried that area of study, but it keeps popping up out of the grave every so often. And now it's becoming more and more mainstream. So eventually I just kind of got over myself and was like, okay, well, I would love to make my space on the internet purely about, my writing and my creativity, but that's honestly not what people really need right now. People need the research and the history behind the incidents we are seeing today so we can understand, first of all, how we got here, but also what the solutions are to combating this type of thing in the next generation. And honestly, if rehabilitation for people currently is possible, and how do processes of de-radicalization work, particularly in regards to communities and community building. So, I do a lot of work with other white people about how do we call each other in? How do we de-radicalize one another? How do we build community with one another? And how do we reroute into the things that are important?
Mhm. Okay, so we've had a little bit of deepness. Now we go. Now we gonna reel it back because you said other white people,
Yes.
and so my question for you might be kind of convoluted. Okay, but how would you explain to the chat the label of whiteness associated with you
Mhm.
in the context of oh, hold on.
I was Remmick. Don't invite me in now.
I'm
I love. It's upsetting because we also look a little bit similar. Look, like Ryan Coogler really got. I really saw myself in Sinners, but like not. Representation matters.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And we look at Remmick kind of like we look at Killmonger. I mean, there's an argument to be made for the argument being made. And I'm not suggesting you're a vampire,
No.
but
No, I have look, Remmick is I think Kugler's research on Remmick was very accurate because Remmick actually has a unique lore about him and the way he views music and story that is pretty unique to don't tempt if he starts
Oh no, oh no.
for a laugh, so don't tempt me. I'll sing Rocky Road for you and Rattling Bog. How's that?
There you go.
We'll have a good old session. That was all Remmick needed was a session. He could have had that back home. All right, but so in
But in all
regards
seriousness, yes,
but in
in
all
all seriousness,
seriousness,
I'm poking fun, but also we have a lot of conversation on this channel about white people and
Mhm.
what is white people's role in the conversation. And I've said to people several times, I will never have a white person on Conversations for the Culture. Here
Oh,
you
I
are.
feel you really did invite me in. You really did say, "Come on in."
I really did. I really
I
did.
hope look, I hope I don't disappoint you or
I'm
murder
sure you're doing
everyone.
just fine, beloved. You're doing just fine.
But, no, it's like I pull out a banjo out of nowhere. You're like, "Okay, well, maybe we should table this." No, but Remmick was I was when I first saw Sinners, I was kind of blown away. So my and specifically, a Southern Irish traveler. So my proximity was, so for those who don't know what Irish travelers are, we are a subset of the, Irish national or the indigenous Irish population. So when Ireland was first colonized, during Cromwell, we kind of split off into 2 groups. There was one group that was colonized and sort of gave up their nomadic roots. So Irish people were originally somewhat nomadic. We have traveling routes and ancestral sites that we visit throughout the year, and they are in tune with, the seasons and the cycles. Same with all of our festivals and things like that. And so we were nomadic, traveling with the seasons, looking for food, all, doing work, finding work for, especially for those who left the island and have routes that are around other parts of the UK. Finding work for, merchants or, wealthier people or kings or whatever, and then obviously returning home, or returning to roost for those fall and winter months, until the solstice comes again and we're in motion again. So you have one set of the Irish population that settled and became agrarian. For Irish travelers, we call those settled people or country people. And then you have the Irish travelers who remained nomadic and they kept their language, which is known as a cant gammon. It's rooted in Old Irish and Middle Irish or medieval period Irish. And we kept to our, predominantly indigenous ways. Um, and so I am a traveler. Now, the travelers also migrated to the United States because they faced a lot of persecution. You can imagine, being under colonization as an Irish person was already pretty stressful. And now you're part of a population of Irish people that will not conform and will not give up their indigenous practices. So there is a bunch of Irish travelers who fled to the United States during various periods, in history. So, especially during the famine, there were also a lot, or the G side, there were a lot of travelers who, fled to the Americas. And a lot of us, wound up sort of maintaining our nomadic practices in the South. And this is why you get the archetype of the Southern tinker. Within Southern folklore, there's the archetype of the tinker. Travelers are known for their metalwork and their metal trade. So that's kind of our place in folklore. That's sort of where you can see, as entertainers, as tinkers, as seasonal workers, and that was how we got by in the Americas. Now, some people think that most of us settled in the North, and there are Northern travelers, but a lot of us found all of those odd jobs and all of that seasonal work in the South. because the South loved its exploitable labor. So there's a large traveling halting site in the South called the Murphy site, and that is where a lot of us return or reconvene for festival season or major traveler holidays. Remmick fits the archetype of the Southern traveler, like very, very well. And I was very surprised to see him because a lot of his lore felt rooted in the mythology of Irish travelers, not just Irish people overall, but Irish travelers. Because Irish travelers believe that stories and music are effectively magic. You can cast spells using stories and songs. You can even utilize story and song to manipulate someone's reality, to steal their fate, to alter their trajectory entirely, and you can also use it to possess them. And this is why, like, travelers are a closed community, and we have a lot of stories warning you about who you share your ancestral songs and stories with. Because if you share those songs, you could actually possess that person's soul in their entirety. You can steal someone's soul with music and song. And like Remmick is very much part of that mythology. And that was what echoed as very traveler for me. Because even though Irish people do have that emphasis on story, there's a lot of wonderful traditional Irish tellers out there. The magic of story in that specific way is something I heard growing up all the time. And like if you come from a family of tellers, you know, you'll hear that reiterated. You need to share songs and stories, and if you stop telling stories, you'll turn rotten. Like that was something my grandmother echoed for me all the time because she was like, we're tellers, and she would be like, this is why your mom turned rotten, because she stopped telling stories. So there's also a cleansing element to storytelling as well, where, you know, the more often you share and tell stories to comfort others and to cleanse yourself, the better and lighter your soul feels. That's like another thing, but that's beside the point. But
No,
yeah, so Remmick for me, when I saw him up there, I was like, now I don't think I gave you a license for my likeness.
What do you think that Remmick did for maybe starting to, I don't know, maybe chisel away or at least create a crack in the stereotypical flattened understanding of what it means to be Irish or white?
I think Remmick is a great character because he really opened up, especially for because we talk about how representation matters, and we see white people represented all the time. But in true to form of whiteness, we really see a shallow representation of whiteness. We see the idealized, pedestaled version of whiteness. We don't see the harm and pain of whiteness as a system, and we see the idealized, venerated version of whiteness in most representation. And I think what a lot of people don't understand, and mostly white people don't understand, is that pedestaling something is a form of dehumanization. So the constant pedestaling of whiteness dehumanizes white people in a way because it removes complexity from the identity via both the homogeny of whiteness. So you don't have a culture, you don't have a root, you don't have a story, you have nothing. You are simply white toast and maybe a little butter on it, and that's about it, you know. But this is also the idealized form. So whiteness is pure. Whiteness does not make mistakes. Whiteness is perfect, and it does not allow you to embrace your flaws, and it also doesn't allow you to embrace the cruelties and the indoctrination, you know, what this system actually indoctrinates you into doing. So what Remmick does is Remmick provides, I think, true representation of whiteness and what it feels like to be white. Because there's a reason why white guilt is such a thing, right? It's not because it's, you know, like there are some people that don't have white guilt at all, but I would argue that most white people do have it, and this motivates a lot of their actions and a lot of their awkwardness. You know, Remmick being outside of the juke joint, begging to come in because he wants community, but he's actually very, very dangerous with 2 KKK members standing beside him. That's very much what it feels like to be white. Even if you have the best of intentions, even if you think you're just coming in with a song in your heart and a little ditty to dance, you are still dangerous. You are still inadvertently in community with supremacists, sometimes without even knowing it. And there is an awkwardness that comes with that inherent danger that you are to others. Remmick illustrates very well what it feels like to be white, and also what what whiteness actually is and what it looks like. There is a lot of pain behind this transformation into a monster. And until you actually cope with and deal with that and cleanse yourself of that, you will continue to perpetuate supremacy, and you will continue to find yourself in community with supremacists, even inadvertently. Like on a microcosm, I don't know if y'all, saw the like Vanilla Mace drama that happened recently, where Vanilla Mace and this other girl named Katie was it QT Princess or QT Cinderella? I'm out of the loop on so many things. But she's with this other influencer called QT Cinderella, and Vanilla Mace is blown up and she's sharing the abundance with her little friends. And then QT Cinderella just comes out with the most, very prototypical white people thing that you could possibly say, just out of nowhere. And Vanilla Mace is like, oh no, I've been in community with somebody who is apologizing for Charlie Kirk, who is apologizing for supremacy, who is, an apologist at best. And you can see kind of like the shell shock on her face when she's realizing that she's inadvertently been in community with someone very dangerous. And now she has exposed her community, who is predominantly queer, who is predominantly, people of color, to someone who is effectively a supremacist. But that is the experience of whiteness. That's partly why, like, I think a lot of white people don't understand the importance of being anti-racist. It's not just so, you're actively doing something. It is also so that you don't accidentally create community with people who are apologists or who are themselves supremacists, so that you don't expose, your communities and the people that you love to those people. But, speaking of which, you're just so quick. You're just so quick with the images.
I made sure I was ready today, baby. I made sure I was ready today. Well, what do we want to talk about first? Do we want to talk about this necklace, or do we want to talk about this before the necklace? Because this might be an important starting point for kind of the two-pronged conversation, which is that extremism falls on both sides.
Well,
so where do you think we should start?
Both sides of what?
Both sides of the racial line.
I can speak to where extremism falls in regards to white people.
Oh yeah, I'll speak to the other side. It's totally fine. Let's start here before the necklace. Let's go back to
where it all began.
Yeah, let's go back to what this moment of time represents in the collective culture, and then kind of how it is a catalyst for many things that we are experiencing today. The chat knows exactly what this is, so they don't need the backstory. But what are your initial thoughts on Kanye, I'm gonna let you finish, and Taylor in this moment?
For a second, I thought you were going to use I'm gonna let you finish as his middle name. So Kanye, I'm gonna let you finish West.
See, I had to stop myself because I wanted to add in a bunch of other adjectives about Kanye, and now's just not the time.
Mr. West.
Mr. West.
Can I plug my Substack?
You sure can.
I actually, for anyone who wants to catch up on the Taylor Swift Kanye thing and the TLDR I'm about to jump into, I did do a whole like deep dive breakdown on Taylor Swift's history of dog whistles in my Substack, which is Mr. Foxwell. It's the same username that I have here. So if you would like to take a look at that, that's over on my Substack. And I've got part 2, which is Taylor's PR recovery from
I
this
love it.
era in
I
her
love it.
history coming up. But yeah, no, that moment in the cultural consciousness. So Taylor Swift, as we all know, started in the country music scene, and she had developed a very conservative following. And at this point, we are kind of just emerging from the Bush era, you know. So we've had another resurgence of, you know, supremacy BS moving into the mainstream. People getting much, people starting to become more bold. Not that they weren't always bold, but you know, they come in waves where it's like, oh, it's not socially acceptable. Oh, but maybe it is now. Oh, but maybe now. And so we were kind of getting a wave of that towards the end of the Bush administration and during, but like, you know, and Taylor had created a very conservative fan base. And she's sort of in this moment with the VMAs, the first country singer to really win that award, but also she's starting to make her pivot from country into more so the world of pop and mixed musical styles. And so she's kind of starting to amass a little bit more of a mainstream audience and is moving a little bit away from that conservative base. And then the Kanye West incident happens. And what most people saw was, oh, this is drama. This is beef, you know, and very typical for the music industry. Like, okay, so like we're in for like a little bit of a reality TV moment. They're going to be Taylor Swift at some point even makes a banjo diss track. Like we're coming in for a little bit of a music beef moment. There's another subset of the population that saw evidence for the great replacement theory when they saw Kanye West take Taylor's award and take her little moment and then effectively give it to a black woman. And that subset of the population were part of her conservative base. There was another subset of the population that were exposed to her purely through this moment, who aligned themselves with supremacy and neo-Nazism. And it was these people that effectively, when this happened, Taylor sort of transformed from this emerging pop star into this pinnacle of white woman victimhood. And she started being pedestaled in neo-Nazi and white supremacy spaces after this moment because she was the evidence. Conservatives pointed at her and went, look what's happening. A black man is stealing a moment from a white woman and trying to give it to a black woman. Look at that. You know, and that, for those who aren't familiar with the great replacement theory, the idea of that is that if black people specifically are given, I mean, it extends to all people of color, but it starts with black people specifically. Like that's where the great fear is for many of them, is that if black people get too many rights and they are on too much equal footing, then they will oust white people from power, and then they will oppress and harm white people in the same way that white people have oppressed and harmed them. And so Kanye West, for this fringe, for this, you know, supremacist group on the internet, that was what was happening between Kanye West and Taylor Swift. It was evidence for the great replacement. And inadvertently, because Taylor Swift does fit the archetype for the pinnacle of white woman beauty, blonde hair, blue eyes, rail thin, all of that, and then she gets victimized in this way. And now she has become sort of this figurehead. Regardless of her consent in this case does not matter. She becomes this figurehead for supremacists to rally around and her situation to point to as evidence. And so the years kind of go on, you know, and the banjo diss track comes out. You know, she has this little back and forth with Kanye. She starts getting used in memes. You know, her image and Kanye's image are being used in various memes and propaganda pieces in supremacy spaces, in spaces like 4chan, Reddit, you know, all of this kind of stuff. And then she drops Mean, which is her banjo diss track to Kanye West. And in this banjo diss track, in the music video, this is the first time she gets called out for dog whistles. This is 2011. The music video features basically a bunch of country ass white people playing the banjo and being like, I'm going to live in the big city and you're just going to be mean and I'm better. Yay. And that would be one thing, right? But we have this moment where the only Black people who are featured in the music video at all is a group of football players bullying a nerdy white twink in a locker room. And this is also the only time people are getting physical and with someone or with a victim in the music video. This is the only time the bullies get physical, is when it's the Black guys in the locker room. And then there is a scene at the end of kind of this where they're laid out like a meme. And the meme is called the Five Guys meme. And it's basically, the meme is 5 Black guys encircling like a tiny white girl. And they lay out the nerdy white boy in that exact format for that meme. Now she gets called out on this. They're like, okay, the hell was that? She starts getting criticized for like, you know what? There are a lot of white people in your music videos. There is like, it's a ski slope over there. So, what's going on with that? And why did you only use Black people in this specific context? That's really effed up. But it gets buried. It gets buried very, very quickly, but this keeps happening. Each music video, there seems to be a dog whistle. And the problem with this is Taylor says nothing in true Taylor fashion. And the dog whistles are piling up. And the supremacists who are worshiping her on the internet, who have pedestaled her as this idealized, white woman victim, they are taking this to be like she's one of us. So every time there's a dog whistle and she says nothing over these years, they go, oh, she's one of us. Oh, that was for us. Oh, she's saying these things and positioning these things for us. The fact that there are visual references to popular memes on Reddit and 4chan, they're going, oh, she wouldn't have positioned it or framed it in this way if she wasn't familiar with the meme. So that was for us. So she is speaking their language, regardless if she knows it or not. My personal opinion is that if you are whistling for dogs and you've got a whole pack of dogs in your yard and you haven't stopped whistling and you haven't told them to get, then you're whistling. You want the dogs. You want the dogs in the yard at that point. You might as well open up a shelter with how many you've amassed in your yard. You can't just be like, I didn't mean to. And it's like, well, put the dog whistle down, Miss Ma'am. Like, what do you stop? It's not that hard to not do something anyway. But like, that's my personal opinion on it. But regardless if she intends to or not, this is the result. So time continues to go on. She's amassing all these dogs. The memes are escalating. And we now have memes that are like Hitler quotes over Taylor Swift's face. Journalists like Milo Yiannopoulos from Breitbart and Andrew Anglin from the Daily Stormer, which is a very well-known neo-Nazi publication, are now writing articles about Taylor Swift. And they are writing articles about how she is the ideal Aryan princess. Mm-hmm. She is now becoming the Aryan goddess. People are legitimately rallying around her. And there are, I believe in total, by the time 2018 rolled around and Taylor Swift pissed off all the neo-Nazi fans, she had about 37 articles written about her within Breitbart and the Daily Stormer. And there were other publications as well that were hard right leaning or red pill leaning that also made articles worshiping and venerating her. Look What You Made Me Do comes out and that becomes an alt-right anthem because the visuals within it hearken to propaganda images and videos from Hitler's time. So Hitler's own people are drawing comparisons to Hitler's propaganda videos and certain scenes in Look What You Made Me Do, especially when she is standing at the podium and looking out over her Aryan fembot army. You know, so like Shake It Off also becomes an alt-right anthem, you know, because of and it's because of the dog whistles. There are very specific references to certain tropes, and there is a specific type of language utilized. There are meme formats that are being utilized visually that are speaking the language of these people. So they are gathering around her. Her popularity amongst these groups is escalating. But now something horrible is about, well, this is all horrible, but something even worse is now happening where Andrew Onglin, after Look What You Made Me Do, releases an article where at the very end, he effectively states that Taylor Swift, I'm paraphrasing, but that Taylor Swift is just waiting for the moment to reveal herself to the masses and to command them to draw their swords on the enemies of the Aryan race. After this article drops, Vice picks up the story, New York Times picks up the story. There is a microblogger, a very small microblogger, who picks up this story and writes the infamous article swiftly to the alt-right, in which they theorize, and I personally love this theory, about the lowercase k. So this is the KKK, but they're not loud about it. They're passive aggressive about it. They deal predominantly in memes, dog whistles, and I'm just joking, bro. And this blogger feels that Taylor Swift is a member of this lowercase k. And this is why for so many years, this article, I believe, comes out in 2016 or 2017. But this is why she feels that there have been so many dog whistles since 2011 within her work, because she is participating in that lowercase k. And this is why she hasn't sued or spoken out against any of the neo-Nazis that are worshiping her and writing blogs about her and how much they love her and how much they feel she's on their side, is because she's part of this. Now, the Taylor Swift estate does not agree with this, naturally. So, but instead of suing the neo-Nazi publications, instead of suing the alt-right publications, instead of suing the red pill blogs, she sues this one blogger that wrote swiftly to the alt-right. This blogger gets maybe about 1,000 views a month. And that is the one she sues. Apparently, the letter from her estate was so aggressive that the ACLU had to step in to protect this blogger. This damages Taylor Swift's reputation very deeply, because people are now seeing, people who have been criticizing her for her complacency, for her inaction, for, you know, her silence, her lowercase k silence around all of this. Now it's exploding. There has been now a hardline connection made between Taylor Swift and these groups. And this is why, and also this all kind of is percolating between 2016 and 2017. So, you know, at one point, in order to try and encourage her image, her fans were putting a lot of pressure on her to come out and speak against Trump. But she did not. They rewrote history on this, which is fascinating. There are so many Swifties that believe she spoke out against Trump in 2016. She did not.
She did not. She spoke to local elections.
Yes.
That's what she actually spoke to. She actually spoke to local elections in her home state.
Yes. If you would like to read the Substack on this, I do go in a lot more detail, and there are more sources cited. I utilized the Wayback Machine to dig up some of these old articles that had been deleted. So if you want to check that out, you are welcome to. But yeah, so after this, 2018 rolls around. Taylor Swift is now being a fan of Taylor Swift is now becoming somewhat of a red flag if you're outside the fandom. People are now associating her with prototypical supremacy and white womanhood. So in 2018, she comes out with an Instagram post that is basically a Mr. Mackey-esque, racism is bad, okay? It's bad, don't do it. Don't do racism, okay? Police officers shouldn't be killing black people, okay? Don't be racist, okay? I'm not racist. and I don't think other people should be racism either. And
Mhm.
be kindness. People should have that. The end. And that's kind of that's the vibe of the. I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but like
Mhm.
that's the vibe of the post. And at one point she says racism is serious, and we all agree. Like, yes, Miss Taylor. And so she comes out with this one Instagram post that basically states that, and this kind of kicks off her pivot into being open about her progressive politics. And the man she is dating at the time is also very progressive, but is much more openly active and an activist than Miss Taylor. But Taylor is, embracing being a little bit more open about being progressive, and she does a hard pivot into neoliberal white feminism. So she's bringing the drag queens on. She's pulling all sorts of people into her music videos. She's really trying to pivot from this association to supremacy that her silence has made. So we have years. So 2018 all the way up until arguably now 2025, or the end of 2025, we have been making this concentrated PR pivot. We have also been scrubbing the internet and scrubbing searches of these associations to supremacy. It is very hard to find raws of anything from those days, but you can still find them. I've dug up as many of them as I can for my Substack. But it would take a lot of time to do a true internet forensic. It's still there. It's just there has been a concentrated effort to scrub a lot of it. And
Mhm.
for the most part, it worked. Taylor had really rebranded herself into a more progressive icon. And
Mhm.
she still received some criticisms, but overall, people were able to be like, well, the ones who criticized her before were like, she's changed, and she's shown it in her actions. She's changed. And people who were new had no idea, and there was no way to really find those criticisms the way that they were once everywhere. And now we're to today, and the dog whistles are resurfacing. She is becoming quiet once again. She's going from Trump saying that he hates her to Trump being like, "Oh no, she's actually, she's pretty okay. She's a great girl, and she's marrying a great guy." And we are now back to the Taylor of, I would argue, 2009 to 2018, where she is moving back into that plausible deniability, apolitical space, and the dog whistles around her work are resurfacing. And we are also seeing, the same neo-Nazi bloggers and writers, kind of welcoming her back and writing positive articles about her again. And surely this will escalate the way that it did in the past. But Taylor is a corporation in a human skin, first and foremost. At least that's my opinion. So
Yes.
she requires plausible deniability, just in case things don't turn out in her favor in regards to where this regime goes. So that way she can pivot back into her career and be like, no, I was a progressive the whole time, guys. I was just scared. Let alone the fact that she is one of the most powerful celebrities on the planet, to the point where she could literally float the US economy based off of the Eras tour. Like, rent was due, and she floated the entirety of the United States off of one music tour. And we're going to sit there and pretend like she has something to be afraid of? Oh, sorry, my tiny dog is also full of rage. Um,
All good, all good. So
she's
then
she
how do we get to, for those of you who don't know, okay, well, let's
Mhm.
unless there are other things from her history that you wanna touch on, I wanna talk about the life of a showgirl.
Yes, no, absolutely.
So, Life of a Showgirl comes out.
Mhm.
The first thing Black people, and to their credit, a lot of white women. I was really
Mhm.
surprised at how many white women on social media were like, um, racist.
One
This
of
album is racist. Why is she talking about her fiance's ex-girlfriend in the way that she's talking about her? So it seemed like this was the first time, and you know, I don't listen to Taylor. This was the first
Mhm.
time that I'd ever listened to a full album of hers, or really paid attention to people reacting to an album. And I know there's always been like the, you know, we love it, we hate it, we hate it, no, we love it group.
Mhm.
But at least from what I saw, this time there seemed to be an immediate and then kind of growing, this album is problematic. It's
Yeah.
racist, and in a way that to them felt really overt, right? It
Mhm.
felt really obvious and overtly racist. And then so that conversation kind of goes on social media, and you know, people have their opinions, they feel what they feel, and they've picked their camp on it. And then merch starts dropping, and everybody loses their fucking shit because she drops this necklace with the lightning bolt. So let's talk
Mhm.
about the album, and then let's talk about symbolism, and how does a piece of merch like this, in your opinion, obviously you're not on the design team, but how does something like this get made?
So I've been on design teams before, so that insight I can provide because I have been in positions where I've, due to my cursed encyclopedic knowledge of random horrible things, I've often been in a position where I've had to flag for things like this. So personally for me, if you are paying your design team properly and if you have the right people on staff, there is no way that that gets through. There just is, there's not. 'Cause the styling of it as well, like, to miss the manufacturing of it, that could be one thing, but to miss the manufacturing, the design point, the manufacturing, and then the visuals, the designing and the merchandising of it, to miss all of that that's suspicious. It's very suspicious that you could miss all of those things and that not one person caught it. That either means your entire staff is very young, deeply illiterate white people, um, or
Which happens
I mean,
at the biggest fashion houses in Europe. The biggest fashion houses in Europe create
oh, well,
blatantly racist stuff, and then they get called on it, and they're
they
like, "Petty, we had no idea." Oh,
no, they
you know
do
what I mean? Like, they just had no idea whatsoever. But anyway,
no,
I'm
they
sorry to
do it on
interrupt you.
purpose. No,
Okay.
in oh, no, the fashion houses in Europe, they do it on purpose. They know.
I love this. I love this. 10 toes down. Go for it, Mr. Foxwell.
I no, it's I don't look, I want to try to extend people the same amount of grace that I myself would want because yes, as white people, you are going to step in it. You are. You're just going to step in it. There's going to be a lot of things that you don't know, that you don't understand, things that you say with good intention that will be hurtful or wrong. Like that will happen. That is inevitable. But there is a point. There is a line where it is intentional because an accident, a mistake can happen a few times. But if it is a repeating theme, it's no longer a mistake. It is testing boundaries.
Mhm.
And a lot of times, like as somebody who has worked on, so like I used to work for, this is cursed lore about me. I used to work for Maker Studios.
Mhm.
So we were applying Disney marketing principles, which is because of Disney's history around racism, around anti-Semitism, around caricature, around blackface. Disney is very strict in regards to their marketing and how things can be perceived. Very, very strict because they want everyone's money.
Mhm.
And they're very focused too on brand longevity.
Mhm.
which is why when they acquired Pixar, a lot of the movies really featured a lot of different cultures, a lot of different dynamics, because they realized that people really were yearning to see their own stories represented and their own cultures represented by a company with the amount of prestige that Disney has. And so this was very profitable for Disney. This is why even as Pride was phasing out, Disney was like, "Oh, we'll still do it."
Mhm.
Because Disney wants to keep that brand longevity. They are what will make money first and foremost,
Mhm.
you know? And this is, that's definitely a double-edged sword overall. But anyway, but like when I was, trying to apply Disney marketing Disney marketing principles and safety principles and content safety principles to influencers, it was a nightmare.
Mhm.
But it still happened. And knowing how those things work, knowing how many checkpoints things have to go through, knowing the fact that you are actively searching for every which way something could be taken badly. Your job when you are in this position is to literally read everything in bad faith. That is your
I've been
job.
the person on the team before who is tasked with
Okay, so
that. So you're speaking you're speaking
I'm
my language.
speaking to the
I
choir
totally
right
I'm
now.
always the one being like, "What the who the fuck thought this was a good." Yeah. So I get it, but
Mhm.
you're speaking to the choir, but the chat the chat is picking up what you're laying down as well.
Yeah, so it's definitely when you're looking at big fashion houses, but you also look at what the history of some of the European fashion houses and the history they have with fascism, the history they have with eugenics, the history that a lot of Europe has in regards to, racism.
Designing Nazi uniforms and stuff. Right, right.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the history of Miss Coco Chanel,
Yep.
like that alone. So when you are getting into sort of these upper echelons in these fashion houses, things become very deeply racist very quickly, and it's intentional. They play because the consumer demographic and the people they have to cater to buy their products isn't as accepting of racism as them. They try to apologize with that plausible deniability, but it again, only so look, if there's dogs in your yard,
Mm.
that's all I'm gonna say. If there's dogs in
Mhm.
your yard, at some point, you're calling them dogs on purpose. But, but I digress. So for Taylor Swift and her little lightning bolt moment, it is hard for me to extend my usual good faith towards this, because this is something I would have caught. Like, almost instantly before that even hit the internet. And I'm not even the most well-versed person, and this still looks obvious to me. This specific lightning bolt too follows the exact pattern of the Nazi lightning bolt, So, and I also posted an article about this in more detail on my Substack as well, actually breaking it down and breaking down the visuals of what makes this specific lightning bolt so insidious. So, but especially with two lightning bolts placed together like this, facing in the same direction, what it communicates is obvious. And the fact that so many white women picked up on it so quickly shows that it's communicating the obvious. When things are read in bad faith and they don't hold a lot of water, they tend to fizzle out very quickly, and a lot of people don't pick up on it. But when there is something there, a lot of people tend to notice, and people are not very forgiving and they will not let it go. It's kind of like a good example might be the BB No Money situation. So there was an animation that came out because BB No Money really likes artists and will commission them to do music videos for him and things like that. He's very anti AI, so he tries to encourage indie artists. Chucklebone, who is an animator over on TikTok, made a racy animation of one of BB No Money's songs. And, some people picked up on it and were like, oh, that's a little creepy. That's a little weird, even though part of it, I think, might be Chucklebone style. I haven't looked into it too deeply because I don't care that much. But, like, You can tell, though, with the way that that drama is going, it's fizzling out very fast. And it's fizzling out very fast because it's kind of obvious that this is an accident, and this is mostly on the part of the animator and not really on the part of the singer. So it's dying out very, very quickly.
Mhm.
If it were intentional and if there were a pattern of behavior for
Mhm.
BB No Money, people would probably be hanging on to this very hard and they wouldn't let it go.
Mhm.
Likewise with Taylor Swift, if this were an accident, she wouldn't have a constant history of running into this problem.
Mhm.
We are going on almost 20 years. Almost well, okay, 15 years. We're going on almost 15 years of Taylor Swift running into this problem. That's why people don't let it go. And that's also why, it's not why it looks obvious, but it just looks obvious. It's like it is literally the exact lightning bolt. There's a couple of different lightning bolts that you can compare to identify if something is a supremacist bolt, or as some people call them, cracker bolts. There's a
Mhm.
difference between a lightning bolt and a cracker bolt, and cracker bolts do come in a couple of different varieties. This is one, and they follow the pattern of the I think it's called the Swole rune. So in that Swole rune, which is a riff off of an ancient Nordic rune, because Nazis and Vikings went hand in hand because Hitler appropriated Viking mythology and lore for his own little Minecraft project. So because he appropriated all of that mythology, he also took some of the runes and used those to create a base for his own runes. And this is where the cracker bolt or the Nazi lightning bolt comes from, is the
Fascinating.
appropriation of Nordic mythology in those runes.
Wow.
This is also how whiteness tends to appropriate itself and feed on itself. And tying this back to Remmick, actually, Remmick singing Rocky Road to Dublin is actually Remmick appropriating his own culture. Because in the Easter eggs, we know that Remmick ate an entire boat of Irish immigrants. Because Remmick's Irish culture is possibly pre-Christian, but definitely Celtic Catholic, St. Patrick's era. And Patrick's era, Catholics and Druids walked side by side. They incorporated and shared stories with one another. It wasn't really until Cromwell, which would have been almost 500 years after the era of St. Patrick, it wasn't until Cromwell that Irish culture was truly colonized and Christianity was forced upon them. Before
Mhm.
that, Celtic Catholicism was sort of this new emerging religion that had absorbed the pagan system and the pagan gods into itself in kind of a mutual cultural exchange. This also would have been the era of illuminators as well, where, Patrick and this sort of emerging academic society was kind of happening across Ireland, and it was sort of reaching a little bit of a peaceful age, which was kind of, but anyway, that's Irish history. But Remmick is not Rocky Road to Dublin is about leaving Ireland and leaving the safety of home for the dangers of opportunity and the necessary dangers of opportunity, and bringing the remnants of your culture with you in the hopes that they will protect you while you are seeking survival and seeking opportunity. That's not Remmick's story or experience. It is a story and an experience that he stole from the Irish immigrants who were coming over.
Wow.
So he appropriates and consumes ruthlessly his own culture. And this is tied back to, this is somewhat loosely tied back to the Nazis and the SS bolt, because the cracker bolts are appropriated from an ancient Northern European culture that is no longer necessarily practiced. I mean, we have a revival that's going on, but it was appropriated and decimated in an incredibly cruel and horrific fashion. And like the rune that the SS is based off of is the rune for sun. It is a rune, it is a life rune. Now it obviously looks different from the true life rune, but it has still been appropriated to the point where even if you were to see the life rune, you would associate it with white supremacy. You would associate it with Nazis, even if you saw the real one. But that pattern for that particular bolt follows that appropriated rune. And whether it has a point or a flat top does not matter. It is the two triangles stacked on top of each other.
Mhm.
And they are facing in the same direction, both side by side. It is either an egregious mistake that someone needs to be fired for and punished, most definitely, and they should probably never work in that industry again. Um, or it is something that got through intentionally, the way that a lot of major brands will do this type of thing intentionally, because they are doing a litmus test. How much overt racism is too much? They are doing an audience test. It's it's A/B testing.
Right.
And the thing is companies do A/B testing like this for cultural consciousness or whatever
Mhm.
your internal company system calls it. And this is basically a litmus test to see what you can get away with. How in bad faith are people going to read you or your product? How racist are you allowed to be in public? And that's what this feels like to me.
When this also makes me realize that this moment is also when Beyonce became I don't know, how would you describe the stereotype archetype that Beyonce became for I I don't even know. I don't even know how to group them all together. I'm just gonna say racist white people. For people who fell into the or believed that kind of venerated Taylor as like the Aryan princess, that same group of people then began the 20 years plus of Beyonce represents I guess it goes back to Great Replacement, which is
Mhm.
she represents Black women who are undeserving but get it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, Beyonce in regards to the Taylor Kanye incident, Beyonce, and you could possibly even use this as an analogy for black women on a systemic level as well,
Yeah, this is
where
what I'm
she's not
thinking.
even in the picture. She really doesn't have anything to do with this interaction between the two of them. And yet she is pulled into it regardless, and her image is dragged through the mud regardless, and she is expected to heal the relationship between the two of them regardless. Because we have to remember too in this moment what Beyonce did in response to this moment. Because Beyonce, when she was up getting her flowers and having her moment on stage, what did she do? She pulled Taylor up with her
Yep.
and said, "Come here. I will share my flowers with you because your flowers were stolen." But this is not how conservatives saw it or how white supremacists saw it. And I'm wondering because of how like Beyonce plays 4D chess, part of me wonders because she's so PR conscious. Part of me wonders if she already had an inkling as to how this was going to be taken, especially by the worst. And so she knew she had to do damage control and pull Taylor up with her and stand side by side with her to be like, "No, I'm not stealing her award. You know, Kanye can't give that to me. I'm actually going to give my flowers to her in order to mitigate the damage that has been done between the two of them, between her fan base and the conservative world that she's cultivated around her music and Kanye West's social faux pas, effectively,
Mhm. Mhm.
you know? And so she is doing damage control between the two of them. And it definitely seems to speak to a dynamic that we see play out systemically and interpersonally. because like what was expected of Black women when Trump ran again, and what was expected of Black women after he won again?
I
The
mean,
expectation.
ironically, people blamed Beyonce for
I
not
know.
using her for either using her platform to do this or not using. Bette Midler was tweeting at Beyonce, "You need to tell your fans to da 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 da, and you're not doing enough." And it's like, what the fuck is going on? But in
Yep.
just listening to you talk and just having this conversation, like for us, since I'm the representative of the Black delegation, for us, first of all, you're right in that Black women always have to be paying attention to what are the probabilities that are going to come from this situation and how do I get ahead of it? And
Mhm.
if I don't do something very obvious, then I'm going to be accused of, I must agree with Kanye. I thought, then the narrative is
Mhm.
going to be, even in the mainstream press, that, oh, Beyonce must have thought she was more deserving because she didn't come out and say, no, you shouldn't do that, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
So there's that aspect of it. But I think also,
I do
you
find it
know,
kind of funny how Black women often have to make everything very overt and obvious what they agree with or disagree with, but Taylor Swift doesn't have to be overtly obvious disagreeing with supremacy. But anyway.
mic drop. That's absolutely right. Yes, we do. We do have to perform it on a grand scale so that the record reflects we did a grand thing to state our position. But it just strikes me as listening to you, Black people often we often poke fun at like this narrative out there of Beyonce is in league with the devil. Beyonce and Jay-Z are ahead of the Illuminati. That they are in league with evil entities that give them power that normal Black people would not have. There's no other explanation for it but some kind of evil anti-whiteness force that they are in league with. But what I'm realizing and just listening to you recount the history from the other side that we never talk about. We've never collectively had this conversation is like, yeah, we can ha at it because it is ridiculous and we know it's ridiculous. But in reality, that moment on stage has continued to have a material cascading domino effect in the culture, in the world, in the archetypes between Black women and white women, and who is deserving, who is not deserving, who is sexy, who's not sexy, who's a feminist, who's not a feminist. And then in 2025, Sydney Sweeney, says her jeans are the best. And then everybody's like, well, Levi jeans must be in league with the devil too because they got Beyonce. And it's just like, we hee ha ha. But this shit speaks to the real impact of extremism and how quickly it can be weaponized to have a material impact in the real world. It's
Mhm.
not just, when we are now having conversations about memes in a serious context, I think that's where most of us went wrong in kind of the gen pop of society. Memes were jokes. We were conditioned to believe that they were jokes and that they were harmless, but they have a material impact in the world.
One of the interesting things, I always find this interesting about jokes, and this is, I'm the friend who's like, it's always that deep. Like I feel like every little thing is a tunnel into the center of the earth and out the other side into the universe. Like that, I'm that friend who's like, let me really analyze exactly where all of this comes from. And it's insufferable. It's not. I'm great to be around at 3 in the morning, like 4 drinks in, and after eating a lot of Taco Bell. But like during the day, it's like, man, it's 4 in the
Don't
morning.
threaten me with a
It's
good
7
time now
a.m.
that I know we're basically in the same city. Don't threaten me with a good time, sir.
We're gonna have to link up over that Taco Bell and like have some conversation.
Absolutely. Yes.
But but like the thing about jokes, and we have done ourselves a huge disservice, is that first we've confused policing media with literary analysis. That's just a bummer.
Hold on,
Um,
I'm sorry, just a second. Excuse me, white woman, you are lost, okay? You're lost. I'm gonna redirect you very carefully. Pay attention now.
Mr. Scott, open the door.
Nothing beats a Jet 2 holiday.
Okay, so the mods have escorted you to the airlock. You're no longer able to chat, beloved. This conversation is not about you. Nobody here gives a fuck. Okay? All right, now we have a guest. Be respectful.
I've never witnessed that before.
Oh, that's the airlock. You like
Yeah,
it? It's
I love
cute,
the
huh?
I was it was pretty great.
That's how we get down over here, okay?
I was shaken and not stirred by that. That was phenomenal. I love that.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but we don't get
No,
with
the Jet
foolishness
2
in the chat.
holiday took me out. I was like, "Oh, this is cute little reaction image," and then the Jet 2.
It's one of our
It's
favorites. It really is one of our favorites. Yes.
that was phenomenal. I love that. If you bought a whole stream deck just so you could hit the airlock button, and that's like the only button you press, that's perfect.
It's very satisfying.
It's so good. I don't even remember
Remember
like
what we were talking about?
my brain is with Karen going out the airlock. Like I'm like, I hope she like what planet she going to? I guess it doesn't matter.
Oh,
Just spinning through
gosh.
space.
Just spinning through space. Don't have the proper equipment on or nothing. It's cold out there, beloved. Smells like burnt popcorn. Sucks to be you.
I love how you went, I'm not gonna hold your hand when I send you out this airlock.
No, that's how you get redirected in this chat.
That's phenomenal.
You get the fuck
No,
outta
she
here.
was painfully lost. That was a bit
Yeah,
wild.
she really was.
She
really
truly
was.
she was lost. But no, oh yes, we were talking about jokes. So like one of the
Yes.
downsides is we've confused policing media for literary analysis, which is just a bummer. And it's always directed at marginalized creators. It's never directed at anything that is big box or white, which is something I noticed. Like we will, especially in fandom spaces, I've noticed people will really pick apart how truly awful like Interview with a Vampire is. But nobody has said anything about You, which is a Netflix series that is just steeped in problematic shenanigans. But no one says anything about that. But for some reason, like we got to look at how toxic Lestat and Louis are within the context of their own show. Like, I don't know. Anyway, so we've confused that. We've confused moral policing for genuine literary analysis, which is a bummer. And then we have also tricked ourselves into thinking that jokes are not a reflection of the society in which we live or the times in which we exist. And so jokes effectively have become something that's not that deep, bro, even though jokes, in order for them to land effectively, have to be rooted in the cultural moment of their time and the universal truths of that time. And yeah, and it's just kind of like it's just a bummer. And those memes, and this was one of my points for my personal thesis, was that memes were not just jokes. They were not just can I has cheeseburger. They were reflections of the time and the psyches of the people that were creating them in the times that they lived in, and that they had a significant sociolinguistic impact on our perception of reality and the ways in which we cope with our realities. That's partly why a lot of memes, will really shift based on population. That's why you have things like boomer memes. Minion memes communicate something completely different from the very Dadaist Gen Z meme. So like a minion saying, is it 1 o'clock, communicates something incredibly different from a shadow man coming out of a refrigerator with the word grunk written over it, you know? And those are like, one is very Dadaist and is leaning into absurdism and the nihilism that comes with that, and finding it funny because a lot of Gen Z meme humor is, this is really meaningless and kind of dumb and very random, and that's why it's funny, because it reflects sort of how chaotic and meaningless life is right now. Whereas boomer meme is sort of reflecting the existential dread of a wine mom who is effectively a high functioning alcoholic.
Right.
So
Yeah.
and they're both memes, but they both communicate realities and worlds that are very, very different.
So do you think that the root of extremism is a lack of personal social contentment?
I think that can be a root. I don't think there is one root for extremism. I think there are many roots that combine together to grow one tree. So I think extremism is more like a seed that propagates a lot of different roots. I think one of the seeds to extremism can definitely be that loneliness and that disenfranchisement. I think when we blend loneliness and disenfranchisement with the entitlement of white supremacy, because extremism within the United States, not to mince words, is rooted in white supremacy. Almost all forms of extremism within the US have its roots in supremacy or are a reaction to supremacy. And unfortunately, so many people who are in power, and I think this is probably by design, want to figure out where extremism comes from and where these bad actors come from, but nobody actually wants to name what it is. We'll say red pill, but we're not going to say baby neo-Nazis. But why is it then that, like, once you get far enough down the red pill pipeline, it becomes almost exclusively white once you're far in enough? And that is what is with a lot of these extremist pipelines. The minute you get far down enough into that pipeline, you just wind up at white supremacy or a reaction to white supremacy. And that is inevitably where you wind up. Like, people talk about the extreme left. Well, in the United States, we don't really have an extreme left. The extreme left is a pipeline back into white supremacy and fascism. That's why you'll find leftist people, people get very surprised when they find leftists on TikTok who are effectively just, white supremacist tankies. And they feel that, people of color, particularly Black women, should be sacrificed for the sake of the Great Revolution. It's wild, but it's just white supremacy with a couple extra steps. And that's the root of most of our extremism. Just most people don't want to say it. They just want to dance around it. And there is this collective dancing around and mincing of words. And for white people, I know where that comes from, because it's a desire to avoid white guilt. They want to sit and be like, well, because I'm left, I'm not racist, or because I'm XYZ, there's no way I can fall into a racist pipeline. They don't want to admit that they're vulnerable to these machinations and these lines of thinking, even though your entire life has been spent being indoctrinated into a system that is rooted and founded upon white supremacy. So of course you're going to be vulnerable to it. That is why you have to acknowledge that you're vulnerable to it. That's why you have to acknowledge that this is the version of extremism that exists within the United States. This is why, once you go far enough left in the United States, you will wind up with memes that look almost identical and are just as racist as some of the alt-right pipeline memes, because they are all designed to indoctrinate you back into white supremacy, or at least back into a supporting role for the system of white supremacy.
What do you say to people who say, I'm a non-practicing white?
I don't agree with that. I don't like that personally.
Mhm.
And I know, like, white people tend to disagree with me on this. I've gotten into internet fights over this. I need to not fight in comment sections, but sometimes I do.
It happens.
It's a bad habit of mine. Sometimes I just get a little bit upset, kind of like my tiny dog who's full of rage. But like, non-practicing white is just another way, and I think the reason why I clock it very hard is because it is a way for people to distance themselves from their own whiteness and from the history around that whiteness. So much of the motivations of white people is about soothing white guilt. And anything that soothes that guilt is what they're going to do. So, like, very similar to how white people really jumped on the, like, redheads are just black people, like, trend, and they were really excited about that because there was a way for them to distance themselves from whiteness. And likewise with, I'm a non-practicing white. You can't be a non-practicing white in our system. You just can't. Like, for me, like, sometimes, my partner, will be talking, and, they'll be hating on white people, and they'll be like, I don't mean you though. You're not a white. And I'm like, no, but I am a white. Like, within the
Right.
I'm translucent. Like, there is no opting out of the system. And there needs to be, especially for white people, a radical acceptance of the fact that you do not get to opt out of the system. You are a practicing white, whether you like it or not. You will
Because it's a
still,
social system.
yes, it is a
Yeah.
social system. White is not a verb. Sorry, somebody in the chat said that. Yes, exactly. White is not a verb. It is something you are perceived as, and therefore something that you benefit from. You cannot shear your skin off and walk around as a skeleton. Like, you are going to be perceived as white and benefit from the system. You have been indoctrinated into this system for many, many years. There is no way for you to opt out. And so I don't like the I'm a non-practicing white, because it also kind of says my work here is done. It's like the tuxedo mask meme. It's like, I'm a non-practicing white, therefore my work here is done. And it's like, but you didn't do anything. And you're like, oh, but I'm non-practicing. And it's like, I don't know what does that even mean? Like, does that mean that, like, you don't cross the street when you see somebody that, you feel suspicious of? Or what does that even mean? Like, does it mean that all of the subtle microaggressions that you've been indoctrinated to engage with and to behave as don't exist anymore? Does that mean you have successfully de-radicalized yourself and everyone around you, so now you don't have to? Like, what does it mean?
I think the thing that's very interesting about the statement is it is it's a backwards affirmation that whiteness is inherently racist and violent.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that
Because
whiteness.
what they're saying in saying I'm a non-practicing white is I'm not violent. I'm not maliciously racist. I'm not a member of the KKK. I don't maliciously hate people who are non-white. So for me, when people say, "Oh, I'm a non-practicing white," you're affirming the fact that whiteness is dangerous and that
Yes.
white people are dangerous. And you're saying in the simplest, most pancaked way that you can, that is true, and you don't want to be associated with that thing. But as you said, you haven't actually done anything about the thing.
Yeah. Well, and
It's a morality. It's a play of morality more than it is, or a demonstration of morality more than it is anything. A performance of morality, I should say.
it is a little bit of a performance of morality. And the reason And you bring up a very good point, because what they're saying is like, I'm not a card carrying member of the KKK and whiteness is inherently violent, and I'm not violent. But my argument is that, especially as someone who has been indoctrinated into whiteness, someone who is white, and maybe it's the tism in me that's creating this level of bluntness and stubbornness around this particular topic. But I don't believe that you stop being inherently violent within this system just because you're not in the KKK. Just because your violence is not overt does not mean that you don't have the capacity for a more subtle violence. And this is where I think white people get tripped up very easily, because they feel that racism has to be this very big, scary, evil thing. And it is a big, scary, evil thing.
Yes.
But it can become small and subtle within yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And this sort of only being able to accept this world in which people who are racist are the ultimate evil, and there is no room for improvement and no room for anything, immediately shuts down conversations and critique. So when they do something that is subtle and discriminatory, which could be something as simple as like favoring certain people in interviews subconsciously. No, you're not being overtly or consciously racist. This is a subtle subconscious thing that's playing out for you. But when it gets pointed out, because you've associated racism as this giant demonic evil,
Lynching.
you can't be associated with it under any circumstances. So when somebody points out like, hey, this was a little racist. Did you notice you do this? Like, it's a little racist. Can we like call this in and correct the behavior? The white person in question is going to dig their heels in and start screaming and crying and running a tantrum, because what they feel that they've just been called is they're like, somebody just pointed at them and went, you're part of the KKK.
Mm-hmm.
In their mind, that's effectively what's happened. When the reality is, hey, you've been indoctrinated into this system and you did something very subtle, and I've noticed it, and I would like for you to stop doing that. And that's a normal correction. That's a normal thing. You know, it's kind of like when people find out about my background, sometimes people go, "Oh, you're gypsy." You know, and like I go, well, that's a subtle thing. It's a slur. I don't like it. But it's a subtle thing that a lot of people, you know, when you hear about, you know, people who are traveler Romani or Romani, or even just traveler, they say gypsy, or they'll say tanker. And I'll be like, oh, okay, well, I don't really like that because that's a slur. So could you not use it around? I would appreciate it if you stopped using it. But that's a subtle thing that a lot of people have been conditioned and indoctrinated into thinking is okay to say. But I don't think that somebody who uses the term gypsy is a card carrying member of the KKK.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes it's just an honest mistake.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so we kind of, unfortunately, you know, the non-practicing white thing, I think for white people, is a way to further entrench the idea that racism is this big, malicious, violent thing, instead of the foundations of racism actually being quite insidious and quite subtle. And I don't think white people should distance themselves from that idea. You know, I think it's okay to be like, I am a practicing white because I'm white within this system, and there's going to be shit I have to work on. So I personally don't like the term for that. I think there's ways to acknowledge that whiteness is inherently violent and evil and all of those things without necessarily distancing yourself from it.
How do you think it is that white people don't seem to understand the significance of slavery in this country and segregation and Jim Crow? Like, how did that become so fucking flipped in such a short amount of time that white people in this country went from knowing for damn sure that they did it to, I didn't own slaves. It's not that bad. You just need to get over it. Like, how did that disconnect? Because that contributes to, I think, this erosion of an understanding of the foundations of what got us to where we are today. And it seems like there's a population of people in America that get it. And then there's a population of people in America rooted in white people that today don't fucking get it and don't understand their relationship to it. How do you think that happened?
Well, Goldie over here in the chat said white people decided not to teach their history because white guilt got too heavy. I think that is a very good summary of what happened. The fall of literacy is a huge contributor to this. The defunding of our education system, the refusal to teach accurate history and to teach propaganda, and the barring of access to higher education in which you will think about these histories and these concepts more deeply and more critically and learn to sit in them and sit in the discomfort of them is a big contributor to why people no longer believe that slavery was that bad or that slavery for some even existed. There is also a playing with the different concepts of slavery as well, you know, because slavery is like this umbrella, and under the umbrella we have things like indentured servitude, we have classical slavery, or like a shorthand for slavery during the classical period, which was very different to chattel slavery. And underneath that, we also have chattel slavery. And then there's, you know, social slavery and all of these other types of slavery that exist underneath that umbrella. And because there is no longer like literacy and critical thinking, there is no longer room for the nuances of slavery. So a lot of white people are indoctrinated into thinking, especially through evangelical Christianity, because evangelical Christianity, especially in white America, talks a lot about slavery. And it indoctrinates many people into believing that chattel slavery was similar to the slavery of the Bible. Now, the slavery of the Bible was not chattel, it was classical slavery. And there were pathways out of classical slavery, and there were social protections for slaves and the well-being of those slaves.
What is
During the
classical
classical
slavery?
period. This
What
would
is
have been
classical
like,
slavery?
think like it's the slavery that's associated often with the classical period. So like ancient Greece, Rome,
I was gonna say Roman
Egypt.
Empire type shit.
Yeah, Roman Empire type slavery.
Okay.
So you could buy your own way out. You could work other jobs outside of your master's house. You did have mobility and some protections. Your rank as a slave would also change if you were a prisoner of war, or if you were a servant or somebody born to a servant class, or somebody who was enslaved within that social hierarchy, somebody who went into debt and became a slave. Chattel slavery during this period in history was something that was done as an extreme punishment. Being a slave during the classical period would have been more like being an employee that just had to work a lot of overtime. You still had freedom of mobility, even if you were low ranking. And you could buy your way out in some capacity. There were pathways out of that slavery. But chattel slavery was very different. As we all know, that was you were basically just plucked from your home and then treated as an object, packed onto a ship like cargo, and then you and your descendants were effectively bound to a family or whomever owned your contract, and you had no mobility, you had no free time, you had nothing. You were not permitted to own property. Slaves in ancient Rome were actually permitted to own property. Slaves in ancient Egypt were permitted to own property. So and their descendants were not enslaved. So like you could actually, like, let's take classical Egypt, for example. You could marry, if you married someone who was not a slave, your contract was broken. You could marry out of slavery. And then your descendants, if you had any, even if you were still enslaved when you had those descendants, they were born free. So it's different. It's incredibly different. But there is this, but I feel like everyone's heard it. You'll see it in comment sections all the time where it's like, well, they enslaved people in ancient Egypt. They enslaved people in ancient Rome. They enslaved, okay, but that is very different from chattel slavery. They were not treated as literal objects. There was an acknowledgement that those were people. And evangelical whites are often raised in churches that really equate American slavery to the slavery of ancient Egypt or ancient Rome. You know, a new thing that Christians are saying is that the Bible doesn't say there's anything inherently evil about owning slaves, says Andrea from the chat. And yeah, I mean, that is not necessarily new. That is actually rhetoric that I heard in evangelical spaces growing up. But they do say that. They do cite the Bible as justification for the horror of chattel slavery, not really acknowledging at all that the Bible has very specific laws around slaves and around how slaves should be treated by their masters. And also, it has specific laws around pathways to exit slavery, pathways towards freedom. You know, there is even tale for, you know, biblical rhetoric that states that someone who accepts God and who is accepted into you know, the Jewish or the Christian faith cannot be a slave. So they are freed upon entering the religion. And this is actually backed up historically, because even in ancient Egypt, and this was true for Greece and Rome as well, if you took yourself to a temple and you converted in service to the god of that temple, you were freed. So religion was also a pathway out of slavery. And the Abrahamic religions reflect this as well. If you dedicate your life to God, you are free. But this is not chattel slavery. Chattel slavery did not have a pathway to freedom. It also had no humanity in it. You were effectively reduced to an object to be used and mistreated however your owner saw fit. And that is a horrifying, and it is abiblical, and it is also, we don't have a historic precedent really for it. We had slavery, yes, but we did not have that specific horror before colonial slavery and chattel slavery really took over. Chattel slavery was a rare thing that was a punishment for people who committed the worst taboos of the classical world. And even then, a lot of times their descendants could find pathways out.
That's interesting, because the way that Christianity was weaponized in the Americas against Black and Indigenous people was basically, you are damned in your existence, but you can redeem your soul. Your soul can be free when you die if you give your life to White Jesus. But you, in your existence, living and breathing, you are damned. And so it just speaks to what you were saying about that was not they didn't offer that as a pathway of physical freedom, because you're lesser than, you are damned in your existence. But if you accept Christ, your soul will be free at one point.
And this is more a reflection of middle period Christianity that was very common in Europe at the time. So like we think about the ways that the Roman Catholic Church in particular really leveraged its power socially. And it did this by effectively promising a positive afterlife to its people, to its peasantry. So the peasantry did not have good lives, right? They were living often in squalor. They did have more time off than we do today. So that's a little bit of a bummer to contend with. But overall, they did not have very good lives. They suffered very deeply. Wealth inequality was insane. The social contract of the time was highly exploitative. This is where the Catholic Church really came in, because the Catholic Church promised a luxurious afterlife, effectively in exchange for your current life.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where we get things like penance, where you could buy your way out of purgatory if you had enough money to pay the church. This is also where we got, if you sell your children to the church, you could move up in social standing, or you could buy penance out of purgatory by
Wow.
selling your children to the church. This
Wow.
was the fact that systems that are exploitative will always turn themselves inward upon their population. Always. It is inevitable. So this lie that the church, starting with the Catholic Church, has told the working class population, or the peasantry, or the people that it is exploiting, of you will suffer now but have a great life and freedom later, is not new. This was also something that was told to, the native Irish during Cromwell as well, during those periods of colonization, which is like, you will have your land stolen and you will suffer now. But if you give up your gods and you give up your old ways. I mean, Catholicism had existed in Ireland for 700 years. So they were facing down different, more institutionalized versions of Christianity, particularly Protestantism. But it
Mm-hmm.
was, if you give up your old ways, and if you give up your land and your soul and everything, you will have a great afterlife. And that was all they could promise, but it's the same story. It's the same story escalated and in a different font. But it is the same story repeated over and over again.
I have the most seemingly random question, but there's a tie-in. Where does Assassin's Creed Valhalla where does Assassin's Creed Valhalla fall into? Because that was Cromwell, right? Am I tripping?
Wait, I didn't play I didn't play Assassin's Creed Valhalla.
Oh shit!
I'm gonna look it up. Hang on.
Oh man, you're gonna have to play it, because we're gonna have to talk about it. Because yeah, well, what I wanted to do was try and pull like a pop culture reference in for the chat in terms of timeline, because that point of
You get to assassinate Oliver Cromwell?
That time of trying to quote unquote unify Ireland, that is one of the major storylines.
Now I gotta play it. What? Oh no. You gave me something to do. No. Oh no.
Eyes lit up and everything.
I know. Well, look, the idea of getting to assassinate Oliver Cromwell it's
very interesting. Okay, so for those of you who are, we're a gaming friendly channel and community here. So, but that is part of the time period that Mr. Foxwell is speaking to in terms of Ireland. And I'm bringing it back around. Which is, we've talked about the necklace. We've got kind of, for Black folks right now, we feel like we're going through part COINTELPRO 2.0 and part like the call is coming from inside the house. And we've got, people who look like us who have infiltrated our cult. Well, they were already here, but they have used their gate key
Mhm.
as passage for other people who don't care about us, who want to harm us in some way, who want to commodify, what we do, what we say, how we do it, et cetera, et cetera. We've got, Roblox is a pipeline. We've got all of these things that seem really overwhelming in pop culture, but particularly in, the music that we're listening to. We've got, you know, Taylor Swift making digs at Black women. We've got, even though people on this channel don't listen to Kanye West, nevertheless, Kanye West and his acolytes, right? Who are talking about the aspiration of whiteness, I guess, and who are totally comfortable either leading or co-signing the denigration of Black people or Blackness or Black culture. How do you think, we'll start with music.
Mhm.
What role do you think, like mainstream music, not like fringe, but like we can all see it, we can all hear it type music from the most popular artists. How do you think that plays into, I don't know, is it the normalization of extremism?
I mean, yeah.
Okay. I know my question
I
was kind
think
of convoluted and I apologize for that, but
no, yeah, I think it's a good question, and it's something broad that's important to think about, especially the ways in which, you know, when you're in community, handing the keys to the outsiders, handing the keys. I mean, at least like so like for Irish travelers, it's a closed community type thing. So in this way I can relate a little bit, like obviously not directly because I move through the world like a white guy. So it's different. But like for travelers, it's definitely there is that paranoia of if you let people in, will they exploit you? Will they steal the things that enrich you and that root you to the earth and to your people? And will they cheapen them and hurt them and eventually leverage them to harm you? Like I often think a little bit about the myth of mimics, like in the South or particularly in the Appalachians, the myth of mimics who, they steal your information and they steal your face and they steal your voice, and they might look and sound just like family, but once they are alone in a room with you, they are there to consume you and to hurt you.
are you,
They are
sir?
predators. So it's like, I definitely can understand those concerns because when we look at celebrity, especially nowadays, how much of celebrity is a voice for a unique story and a voice for a unique people or a culture versus how much of celebrity is a mimic? And it's tricky, right? Because there are people that you pedestal and prop up who you hope will tell that unique story of their life or their culture or where they came from so that they can enrich and pull other people up with them. But there's always that fear of what if they hand over their story and their soul, and what if they become that mimic that is just designed to lure us all into that complacency? For Taylor Swift, I definitely think she falls more along the lines of a mimic, and she says just as much. She talks about how she's a mirror. I'm a mirror of my fans. I am a mirror of the culture at the time. I have no unique story, nothing unique to say. If my music is bad, it is because I am mirroring and mimicking you. And that is what she's designed to do. She is designed to act as the mimic that you let in through the door or that you open the window for, who eventually consumes everything and everyone in the house. And like
Well,
most
since we're talking
corporations.
about Drake now,
Are we talking? Oh, does this segue into
we
Drake?
are now.
Perfect.
Shoot.
I'm so excited. So Drake and Taylor are apparently both mimics.
I think so. I think so, chat. Didn't that sound like Drake? Didn't that sound like he was talking about Drake? My God. Yes, because we don't know how the hell Drake got in, but he got in. Um, he got in, and it wasn't until the beef with Kendrick that it seemed like there had been a floodgate of people who weren't willing to say Drake is actually a mediocre ass artist until there was permission. And Kendrick was like the greatest permission slip the culture got, was to be like, actually, he's really mid. Actually, he's really problematic. Actually, his music is really degrading to Black people. Actually, this isn't what we like, but he looks like us. He does everything he can to sound like us, no matter where we're from on the planet Earth. It can be the South, it can be Jamaica, it can be the UK. He does everything he can to put on a suit of Blackness while also talking about it as talking about us as if we're subhuman, talking about our greatest artists as if there's something wrong with them. You know, he has a line in one of his tracks aimed at Kendrick where he says, um, "You're always rapping like you're trying to get the slaves freed,"
Why
and
would
it's
that
just
be a bad thing?
and it's just like, what the fuck did he just
That
say?
I'm so happy I don't listen to Drake, but maybe I should listen just so I can have more knowledge in my repertoire. I guess it's kind of funny because I have like I don't typically, unless it falls into like my pipeline research, I don't typically research a ton of music overall, right? I wish I did because like I'm having this whole world kind of open up for me when it comes to music. But I can proudly say that like for most major artists, I can always find a favorite song. But now I'm extra happy to say that I never found a favorite song for Drake.
Me
I remember
neither,
the first
fam.
time I listened to him and I was like, this sounds like mall music. Like I could buy a nice pair of slacks to this music. But I can't it's not like it doesn't speak to me in any kind of significant way that you would hope that art speaks to you. You
There's
know?
no it's interesting because white industry power brokers are the ones that taught Drake how to mimic,
Mm,
but they never had our stories.
yeah.
And that's why his music is about nothing.
Yep. I mean, he
I
and Taylor have that in
I'm having
common.
that light bulb moment right now, is
Mhm.
that he doesn't have anything of substance to say because he has never had those stories
Yeah.
passed down to him through the culture, which is why, there were a lot of people who, even Black people, who were like, "How could Kendrick call him a colonizer?" And I call him a colonizer too from several different angles. I think it is significant that he is Canadian and that he colonizes and appropriates other cultures, because that's something that Canada is hugely sensitive to, based on the appropriation and commodification of indigenous culture. But he
Mhm.
just doesn't really give a shit. It's just a means to an end. And now that jig is up for him, right? Now he seems to be sliding ever, ever, ever closer to just putting on the red hat and
Yep.
saying, "Make America great again."
Well,
And, hanging out with Morgan Wallen and, continuing to kind of sneak diss. And, he seems very upset that Black Americans can achieve things that he cannot. He seems very upset about happy Black relationships between Black men and Black women. These are kind of the things that he really harps on the most. And
huh.
that money is is that money and chart position are what actually make you a great, when we know he's really fucking bothered that a brother from Compton could dust his ass with both arms tied behind his back, half sleep. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
so I know I'm kind of rambling here, but I'm also just kind of processing as I'm thinking about what you said and the things that we've been talking about on this channel, of just how, because that's the point that we feel that we're kind of at right now, is he got in, he mimicked. Once the mask was torn from him and his persona was irrevocably cracked, he turned on all of us.
Yeah.
Literally tried to fuck our First Amendment rights through a bullshit lawsuit that would have had a disastrous effect on Black art, on freedom of speech in America. I mean, it would have been a horrible precedent that we would all have had to suffer with. And then meanwhile, he just continues to slide towards white supremacy. Like, what the fuck is going on?
Well, and that's so interesting because, like, tying drawing parallels between Drake and Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift, like, partly why the ACLU stepped in to defend that journalist was because the case that would have been brought forward for Taylor and that journalist would have set a horrific precedent for freedom of speech, which was why the ACLU stepped in. Because they were like, if a case goes forward, there could be a precedent for billionaires to silence independent journalists, even when there is evidence and even when things are clearly opinion based, and this could have a significant impact on freedom of speech for Americans going forward. So to hear that parallel sort of happening with Drake, where Drake is also flexing his wealth and his power in order to directly harm the Black community by setting legal precedent that could harm people generations down the line, that's very much in line with what whiteness is. Because at the end of the day, whiteness is a system of power. It is something that, even if you are not visibly white, you can temporarily purchase space and power within. And there
Mhm.
is this unique thing that happens with marginalized groups within white supremacy. And this not just within white supremacy, but underneath systems of oppression in general, where you will get individuals who try to throw everyone else under the bus in the hopes that they will be singled out as the exception. And most famously, we saw this play out with the Jews for Nazis group in World War II, where you had this faction of Jewish Nazis, who, were basically became police officers and minders over the general Jewish population and were in line with the Nazi regime. And all of those Jewish people who were part of that Nazi Jewish organization, all of them met the chambers just the same as everyone else. And they were easier to target and single out because they were organized underneath the Nazi party. So there was nowhere for them to hide when the regime finally turned on them. But this is that's an extreme example of this phenomenon. But we do see it play out. You see it play out like right now within the queer community. There's plenty of Blair White is a great example of this. She often identifies herself as conservative and placates conservatives. She has, alt-right guests. She's very into red pill content, bioessentialism, rhetoric, all of that kind of stuff, even though she herself is a trans woman. But she plays nice with the alt-right, and she identifies herself as very conservative. Conservatives don't F with trans people at all. So why she's doing that, I don't know, but she does it in the hopes that she will be singled out as one of the good ones and that she can save herself and amass power for herself as long as she wears that mimic mask of one of the good ones. There's this hope that she can leverage her whiteness and her white womanhood into supremacy to gain access to it, not really realizing that she will be leveraged opportunistically. And then when the time comes to boot her out, she will meet the same fate as everyone else. But
That's
they will
kind of
grant,
like,
huh?
I was just gonna say that's Latinos for Trump in this
Yeah.
last election cycle, the majority of which have been deported or lost their legal status, and were
Hmm.
shocked, floored that they wound up on the deportation list.
Yep. Someone said useful tokens get spent. Yeah, I mean that's exactly it. You know, it's wild because I don't know how many times historically this is going to have to play out for people to understand that white supremacy at the end of the day is a classist power structure designed to funnel wealth and power into a small handful of individuals. It is not designed to be something that everyone has gainful access to. And there is no playing nice with it. Even for even for other white people. If you are lower class enough, if you are not the right type of white person, this system will also turn itself upon you. I think many white people are seeing that now. They're finally seeing that this system is designed to eat them as well. It's just designed to eat them last.
That's what we call a fucking bar. Okay. There's so much shit we could talk about right now. I'm just trying to gather my thoughts.
Did I get a
you come
sacred
from
high
a
five?
line you come from a line of tellers. Where do you think we're going as a society right now? No pressure. Just read us all. I actually, in all seriousness, your knowledge base on tech, the algo, how we are manipulated into what we engage with, and then kind of like this, I don't know, let me try and clarify my damn thoughts. Do you feel like we are headed for a critical mass that will disrupt the current track that American society is on? Or do you feel like we're gonna have to go through to get to a space we've never been in before?
Mm. Well, I am a fan of the saying the only way out is through.
Same.
So I do think we do have to go through. There's this theory called nothing ever happens. And in the theory of nothing ever happens,
Yes.
we have a build up to something and then nothing happens. And then we have a build up to something and then nothing happens. We are still escalating and we never go back down to baseline. We continue to escalate up, but nothing ever happens.
Mhm.
And that's partly why I think I'm more partial to the only way out is through. This
Mhm.
long-term frog boiling that we are experiencing right now, where the temperature never gets quite hot enough to kill us, nor does it get hot enough to encourage enough people to jump out of it, I think will continue. And this is part of the insidious nature of, conditioning and indoctrination. We are undergoing a massive shift. You can tell, and this massive shift has been happening for a very long time. Like if we want to go back to like even pre-technocrat era when foundations were being laid with the Heritage Foundation before their collaboration with the technocrat movement and the Dark Enlightenment movement, this has really been going on since Nixon.
Mhm.
This dismantling and this desire to return kind of to the robber baron era, or like that period just before we got real robber barons where people were still enslaved, but you had this sort of kind of high industrialization of the United States happening. So what, late 17, early 1800s maybe? But there's this desire to go back to almost this transcendentalist period in our history where everything was unregulated and it was just kind of the Wild West of exploitation. And there is this motivation to really recondition us for that society. And I do wonder if they will successfully recondition us for it, because they've been trying to since the 60s. You know, there's been a concentrated movement and within the Heritage Foundation to do that. I do wonder if we might be too unruly as a population at this point to allow for that. So I don't know if we'll be successfully reconditioned into this. I do think the only way out is through. I don't think there is going to be this spark moment for a revolution. We've had a few powder kegs that could have set it off, but I don't know. I don't know if it will actually spark. I don't know if we'll get the spark. Something incredibly drastic would have to happen to powder keg us into a revolution that will cause us to upturn the apple cart. But structurally speaking, I feel like if we upturn the apple cart now, we would just recreate the same exploitative system. As a population, I don't know if we have really done the work within us to keep ourselves from recreating the same exploitation. We have lived underneath the benefits of exploitation for so long that I don't know if we know how to make or conceptualize a society without it. I think that there has been an intentional attack on our literacy, because one of the beautiful things that creativity and literacy gives us as a blessing is the ability to reimagine our society differently. One of the greatest things that literacy gives us is empathy. And so with that ability to idealize or visualize the future, we are also able to visualize futures that are more empathetic. And so futures that are better for everyone going forward. And I think that's why there's such a targeted attack on literacy in general, because it will hinder our ability to imagine that world. So when or if a powder keg does go off, we will just recreate the same world because we cannot see anything different. The benefit of going through is that it gives us the ability and the time needed to visualize that better world. It allows for speakers to teach and tell the stories that need to be told in order for that world to be visualized. It gives us time to potentially repair. But we'll see. I do hope that by going through, we learn to recreate community and we learn to give that gift of literacy and visualization for that world going forward. That
One of
is
the things, yeah, one of the things that I have said since the beginning of this year is that we have forgotten so much. As you said, can we even conceptualize true alternatives as a society? And I've said that in order for great change to come about, that humanity needs to remember. And so whatever circumstances are required for us to be forced to remember, that is what is going to happen next. And that to me is what speaks to we're going to have to go through.
Yeah. I would agree with that. And one thing that has been kind of heartening to see, and I know the algorithm creates a bias for me, but I will say, because I've never seen it before. So, you know, growing up, because I was always very tethered to my, you know, to my personal roots and my family and my, you know, our belief systems, you know, and I speak a cant gammon, or well, a Southern cant, and I do speak some Irish. I remember growing up being made fun of for these things and for having these tethers and having these roots, by both Irish nationals and by, typical, like our garden variety white kids in school. It was always seen as something worth bullying. But nowadays, I've been seeing more white people than ever before want to create genuine attachments to where they came from and their histories, their languages, rejecting the idea that they belong to America and embracing the idea that they are immigrants from elsewhere and that they have a home and that they have stories that have just been forgotten. And so this work of unpacking, I think, in a way that I've never really seen before, in numbers I've never really seen before, is starting to happen. So there is this desire to remember the old. I think that's why we also have a lot of white people turning towards paganism, because there is this desire to find what has been lost.
Mm-hmm.
There is this desire to bring to the surface what has been forgotten and abandoned by their families. And that in and of itself gives me quite a lot of hope, because it is becoming more unacceptable for them to be systemically white. They are rejecting, this is like a very conscious and clear act of rejecting the homogeny of whiteness. Even saying things like, I'm not a practicing white, as much as I'm critical of that and don't like it,
Mm-hmm.
it does give me that little glimmer of hope, because there is this very strong desire to reject the institution and to embrace who they actually are, who their ancestors actually are, what their true histories are, and to also face down the ways that colonization has impacted them. So that gives me a little bit of hope that we perhaps will find those old things and remember those old things. And I emphasize white people being the ones to find them, because in an institution of white supremacy, you need to have decolonized white people who are able to fight within the system and reject the system while holding power within it. And I think that is what a lot of white people are trying to learn right now. They're learning the difference between being a white savior and being a white person who rejects the system and takes action against that system. And it's a long ass road though. I don't know. Like, it's not,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we might not, I mean, look, we might not even get there in my lifetime, but it is nice to see some of the seeds being planted for that future. I just hope it's not too little too late.
So in terms of it might not happen in our lifetime, what do people with children
Mm-hmm.
raising the next generation trying to navigate, I guess I'll try and use as simplified as language as possible, but trying to navigate the gravitational pull of extremism through platforms and mediums that just look like fun.
Oof.
How do families navigate that and guide young people? I'll say the first thing they need to do is know what the fuck to look out for, but
Well,
beyond
yeah,
that.
that's a big one. I mean, my solution is burn all of your electronics, go into the woods, and then never come out. Just live there in the woods. survive off the land like that. That's my ideal solution. That might be too extreme. I have this perpetual fantasy in which I run off into the woods and live off the grid.
The chat knows this about me. Again, don't tempt me with a good time. The chat knows. I'm like, y'all, one day I'm just going to announce to y'all I found my hut in the woods and I am out.
If we vanish, it was either the government or the woods that called to us. And it's not going to, it's one of those.
That's it exactly.
But no, for for raising kids who are, so here's the thing, everyone is prone to propaganda, everyone is prone to radicalization. That's the first thing. No one is immune to propaganda, like, period. But there are things that you can do to fortify yourself against propaganda, and a big part of that is literacy and critical thinking and empathy. And it's not just literacy as in, like, I know how to read a book, but it's also things like cultural literacy, contextual literacy, social literacy. All of these things and advanced critical thinking skills are fortifications. And the ways that you get those things are through exposure to a lot of different people in a lot of different communities, and a very, I think, strong family system and strong emotional attunement. So being able to emotionally attune to your child and to create an ultimate safe space that is free from judgment is going to be very key to monitoring them and their activities online, because they're going to be more likely to be like, hey, someone said something kind of weird to me. I want to ask you about it. And knowing that you will not get angry with them, knowing that you will not judge them for asking questions, will allow them that space, and you can catch it before it becomes a problem. But it's very tricky. I mean, creating very diverse groups of friends is essential. I mean, I've actually had, like, white parents, like, schedule meetings with me through TikTok to be like, how do I fortify my kids against this? And a lot of what we talk about is creating diverse groups of friends, because one of the things about whiteness for white people is that whiteness, especially white guilt, encourages you to stay within your little bubble of whiteness, where you have your white family and you have white friends and you have white coworkers and everything around you is white. It's like Taylor Swift's ideal neighborhood. Is Taylor Swift's ideal neighborhood.
Child, he said Taylor wearing a hood, y'all. Did y'all hear him say Taylor wearing a hood?
Taylor,
Freudian slip, I guess.
I guess. Taylor's homogenous hood, I should say. But it's like, Taylor, someone said Tiffany hoods. Oh man, I'm turning a tomato over here. But no, like, it's like Taylor Swift's ideal neighborhood, or Taylor's hood, I guess. Where everybody's homogenous, everybody looks the same, and you don't really have a lot of differing opinions. And the thing is that growing sorry, Love Child's like, I'm calling her that from now on. Me too, actually. It's a new nickname right there. But anyway, so hood Taylor Swift. Anyway,
She did sing about it in one of her songs. She said she wants the whole cul-de-sac full of babies that look all the same.
That was so again, like, this is where the autism sometimes gets in the middle of my ability to analyze things, because when she said got the whole neighborhood looking like you, I was like, how many kids are y'all having? And is this a commune situation? Did you buy out a neighborhood for all of your 20 and counting children to live in with you? Does each infant, like, my brain immediately went into what are the logistics because Swifties kept being like, no, they're talking about their babies. And I'm like, logistically, that does not make any sense, Deborah.
Not Deborah. Logistically, this is like you remind me of a friend of the channel, Kiki. Kiki would do the exact same thing. Logistically, Deborah, that doesn't make any sense.
Exactly. Logistically, Deborah, I'm gonna have to call bullshit, because how many kids would you have to make a cul-de-sac? First,
seriously.
I thought that's too many kids to care for. What the hell? Exactly, yeah. Lulu. It's the opposite of Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. I know. Well, now I'm kind of thinking about like Taylor Swift's Aryan clone army in Look What You Made Me Do. Were those her future children? And is that the cul-de-sac coming into formation? It's apparently all of her songs are supposed to tie together. So
I wonder how many Black children they'll adopt.
not the Brad and Angelina. I'm not racist. I adopted a Black child.
Yep. I wonder how many. I mean, she got what, 1, 2 Black dancers she always keep around. I think that's representative of the future children that she plans to adopt.
Did she adopt those dancers? I think are we gonna come out and is she gonna come out like 5-10 years down the line and be like, my 2 Black dancers, those were actually my 2 Black children.
Wow.
I adopted them.
Wow.
And then there will be like a whole,
quite honestly.
I would not be surprised. And then there's like a whole line of like Target stuff that is like dedicated to her Black children. I can see the merchandising. I can see it now.
Oh my God. Wow.
It's always the Target collab. It's always everything ties into a Target collab for Taylor Swift.
So yeah, anyway, protect your kids and whatnot
From Taylor Swift.
from Taylor Swift's kids. Protect your kids from Taylor Swift's kids. My kids came up in internet cell phone life. I've got a 30-year-old and a 25-year-old, and I got rid of cable, and they weren't allowed to have smartphones. They had the little children's cell phones so that if something went down at school, they could get in touch with me, or, it was literally just a communication device with, you can only call the numbers that are programmed, only the numbers that are programmed can contact you, et cetera, et cetera. And I have the same thing. I have people come to me about their kids. What do I do? This, that, and the other. And I'm like, well, I can only tell you what I did. And I start by saying, I got rid of cable. And they act like I said, don't feed your kids and have them sleep outside. And it's just like, listen, beloved, respectfully, if you want to be a pussy ass parent, I don't know why you ask me of all people what it is that you should do about your kids. I don't have the luxury of being a pussy ass parent raising Black children. So I had to make a conscious choice of, yes, I know they're going to see it when they go to their friend's house. I don't care. I'm not policing that house. This is my domain. I'm the sheriff of these 4 corners right here. I'm the law. So no online gaming with strangers, no, none of those things. And if I had children today, I would still implement the same fucking rules. No internet access unless I can see the screen. No gaming online with friends. Certain games are completely not allowed. I don't care how popular they are, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think when you talk about, I'm bringing that up because you talk about like, how do I fortify my kids? How do I fortify my kids? You got to stop doing, parents, what everybody else does. When your kid is coming home and saying, well, Johnny has this and Tamika has this. I don't give a who shot John what Johnny and Tamika have. You want to go live with them? Go ask their parents, but you live here. You're not there to be popular with your kids. You're not there to always be liked by your kids. You are there to protect them and protect their developing mind so that they can get old enough to get to that discerning space of, somebody online just said something weird to me, and I want to ask you, my parent, about it. And even if I don't know what it is, I'll say, let's go figure it out together and learn that together.
And I think that's exactly what should be done. Because like literacy and being able to develop empathy and having diverse groups of friends, that's all great, especially while they're growing up. But it does need to be coupled with that high control over the internet. Because there is a reason why major tech CEOs do not allow their children on these algorithms. There's a reason why they're not allowed to have smartphones. There's a reason why they are not allowed to have screen time. We joke about brain rot, but it is very real. And having been part of companies where I've had access to private studies on the way these algorithms interact psychologically with consumer brains across age demographics, it's not good.
Mhm.
It erodes, it puts you in an activated state. And that is the goal of most of these algorithms for shopping on social media, is it puts you in an activated state. So you when you go onto TikTok, you'll be on your baseline and it'll show you a funny video, and this to your brain signals like, "Oh, this is a safe, fun place to be." And then as you scroll, it might show you an ad or a couple of ads. And depending on how you respond, will set the baseline for what ads it shows you in the future. As you continue to scroll, it pulls you viciously out of your baseline. So it'll be an image like a shooting, footage of the genocide. It'll be some horrific type of news that activates your nervous system. And this is what activates the doom scrolling process. So now your nervous system is activated in a traumatized state or in a fight or flight state. Then it'll show you a targeted ad. The hope is that you will want to self-soothe by buying something. This is why it shows you enraging or traumatizing content. If you don't buy something, it might show you a little bit more doom, or it might bring you back to baseline. If the algorithm or the app senses that you might leave because you're getting too stressed out, it'll bring you back to your baseline. And it'll show you comforting content or funny content. And then it'll show you ads again to see if, you're more willing to buy. And then if you don't buy, it'll start showing you traumatizing content again. And then it'll try and get you to buy and self-soothe. And it'll take you on this roller coaster. This roller coaster is designed to dysregulate your nervous system. But what it does is it, in the long term, creates disassociation issues with brain fog, with focus, because you are traumatizing yourself repeatedly through the algorithm. And in order to cope with this, you disassociate, which keeps you on the app longer because you are not thinking about it. You are now in a fight, flight, or freeze state because you can't do anything about the trauma that you're being exposed to. You are in a freeze state. So you're just, and this is what doom scrolling is. Your nervous system is activated, but there's nothing you can do about it. So you freeze, and then you just scroll and you disassociate. And eventually you will buy something to self-soothe. You cannot put a child in that environment. You shouldn't even be in that environment yourself, let alone putting a developing brain in that environment. Those algorithms are incredibly dangerous to young minds. They are very dangerous.
Yes, Mr. Foxwell, name the same everywhere. YouTube, TikTok, and the Substacks, baby. The Substacks.
Yes. But yeah, a big thing for kids is going to be keeping them off of the algorithms and off of everything until they are old enough to be able to cope with it and in tune with their bodies enough to know when they are getting dysregulated so that they can put it down and walk away. But we will one day look back on social media and these algorithms in the way that we look back on cocaine and soda, snuff boxes, and brutal psychiatric treatments. We will look back on algorithms and the fact that we are raw dogging these things in the same way. Because no wonder everyone has fried out empathy. No, because your empathy when you are in an activated state fries out. No wonder we're all disassociated. No wonder we have so many issues, because we are sucked in to this constant barrage of short form content that is actively traumatizing us. Our brains are mush. They are mush at this point.
Nobody is suggesting that people don't have agency. Okay, to the person who's leaving this comment, nobody is suggesting that people don't have agency. What we are not even suggesting is we're just acknowledging the fact that these platforms and algorithms have an insidious impact on people, regardless of your agency or not. Okay.
My
wanted to address
YouTube
that.
channel has some stuff from my audiobook days, but I do plan on uploading more in-depth videos and essays to that channel.
Yeah,
So
I know that people, and listen, I was thinking about this. I should say this out loud because I've typically been extremely strict about like TikTok and people posting from TikTok in the Discord. Like I had a zero tolerance policy. TikTok is dangerous. Don't post shit, blah, 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 blah. I'm also just, ornery at times. And if you want to ask me who is going to be more harmful to Americans with TikTok in its hands, the Chinese or the Americans, I'm going to go ahead and say the Americans. So go crazy. Go crazy on TikTok. Yes. The best place to find Mr. Foxwell's great content is on TikTok and Substack, in my opinion, as somebody who consumes the content.
Can I take a quick intermission real quick?
Oh, yeah. Go do your thing.
I'm going to run off.
Okay. Well, we'll take a little stretch break.
I'm not. I'll come back.
Yeah. We're going to take a little stretch break right now. And so we'll both be back in 3 to 5, gang.
All right.
And then we'll finish up. Okay, y'all. Quick stretchies. Get refresh your drinkies. I'm going to go to the bathroom real quick. And then I'm going to do the questions about aliens and music with Mr. Foxwell as we get into our wrap up. But if you also have very specific questions, prepare those. Don't drop them yet. I'm walking away. So don't drop them, but start thinking about if you have specific questions for Mr. Foxwell or for myself as we get into this last but maybe half hour 45. And then we'll go from there. All right. I'll be back in a minute. Okay. Mic check. We good, chat? Everybody hear me okay? Let me read off these super chats real quick. Demetrius, thank you for the $20 contribution. Much appreciated. Jen Lynn, it's a great conversation. I'm so pleased that we could bring it to you. Thank you for the $5 contribution. Raphael, thank you for the $5 super sticker. Sabia, welcome, welcome. Selena, excellent guest and topic. Thank you. A Brown, thank you for paying tithes. Appreciate it. Old school Gemini coming through with the big gift for
Oh,
the
wow.
live stream. Appreciate you very much. And Twilight Stylight, thank you very much for the contribution. Okay, one more kind of serious question before
Mhm.
I ask you some frivolous. Well, they're not frivolous, but they're not as serious as these ones. Do you think with one of the things that I was waiting for during the aftermath of the Charlie Kirk situation was I was waiting to see, not like, but we'll see what happens. Waiting for the mainstream media to report the real about what happened to Charlie Kirk, who was involved, the extremism, all of that. They never did. Do you think that there will become a point in time where the mainstream media actually gets into these topics in an informed way?
It's inevitable that it will happen because more and more of these, radicalized individuals will begin to take action, and it won't be something that can be pushed aside or ignored anymore. One of the interesting things about Kirk is that the memes were misinterpreted, and then there was a media attempt to blame trans people or members of the LGBT or LGBTQ plus. And once it came out in mass that those memes were actually connected to alt-right pipelines and neo-Yahtzee pipelines, all of a sudden there's a gag order on everyone related to the case. And there's no one talking about it anymore. And that is, obviously is by design, because the hope was that people would be ignorant and illiterate enough in regards to some of these things that would be something they could pass under the radar and blame on a targeted group. To blame on Democrats, to blame on queer people. And enough people who were fans of Charlie Kirk um were literate in those spaces and actually recognized some of the calling cards to be closer to Groypers or people who are adjacent to Groypers or extreme fans of Nick Fuentes, and who understood the drama between Kirk and Fuentes to pin it more closely to Fuentes than to Democrats. It was really mostly older people who were not super literate within the fandom of this space that were quick to blame Democrats, which obviously is scary and disheartening, but it died very quickly because once people started discussing more openly sort of these fringe extreme right-wing spaces and how they really circle more so around white supremacy and not so much what people colloquially refer to as identity politics. Um, Once that distinction was made, then people who were, more like MAGA Facebook moms and stuff like that were like, oh, wait, oh, so this is internet extremism, which is scary to me, but I don't really associate it with Democrats. It immediately died out. The hatred towards Democrats fizzled, so it spiked quickly and then fizzled just as fast. And when they couldn't spin that narrative, the story completely died. But I might be thinking about it too. Maybe I am thinking about it too deeply, and maybe it's more opportunistic than this. But when you are looking at radicalized extreme groups and you are a figurehead amongst those groups and you want them to mobilize at strategic points throughout your reign, you might want to take attention off of them very quickly so that when they mobilize again to engage in terrorist action, they are free to do so, and you have plausible deniability around the knowledge of them so that they can take those actions or take those actions more strategically. But I'm just thinking about the opportunistic leveraging of extremism by established political groups throughout world history, not necessarily, I obviously have no evidence for this, but if I were a regime leader at a pivotal point in world history and I had a decentralized organization of weirdos that could mobilize at the slightest dog whistle, then that is probably what I would do. But yeah, but I think overall though, I think it is probably by design that the story fizzled out as quickly as it did because it was so closely tied to right-wing extremism.
But they didn't replace it with, like, the facts. They didn't get into the nuance of, "Okay, this is actually what's happening, and this is actually what these memes mean." They just said, "Oh, that report about the carving on bullets being about trans rights, it wasn't. Our bad. So sorry." I even felt like that leak was by design.
Yeah.
I felt like that leak was totally intentional and by design by somebody on the inside who saw an opportunity and just ran with it.
Well, and here we're getting around, I think, like the literacy around propaganda, right? And the function of propaganda, especially opportunistic propaganda, like what we saw with Nick Fuentes. So there's a book that's very good on this subject called Hyperreality, and it discusses how the concept or the theory of hyperreality works within a social media landscape. So there's basically a major terrorist incident happens or a news story breaks, and we don't have all the information, like the death of Charlie Kirk. And this vacuum of information is created. And when the vacuum of information is created, the truth does not matter. Whomever is first to fill the vacuum of information is the one who gets to dictate the truth. Now, this phenomena is incredibly advantageous for propagandists and for media personalities and for a lot of people who desire political power or media control. And everybody participates in this to an extent. Especially political influencers participate in this because this is also how people make their money. It is how algorithms function. It does not matter who has the best information and the most thorough, credible information. It is who got there first. So misinformation spreads wildly as truth and as fact within environments like this. The Trump regime is notorious for taking advantage, and honestly, alt-right news pundits in general are notorious for taking advantage of the information vacuum and developing out of these information vacuums a hyper reality that operates above or parallel to the true reality of what is actually happening. So with Charlie Kirk's death, that information vacuum happens, and then Musk and Trump immediately fill the information vacuum. And because both of them are seen as powerful and as credible sources, people take it to be the truth. And what happens when people identify something as the truth and they identify with it in their core, that truth cannot be challenged because you are no longer challenging this series of facts. You are challenging the person because they've adopted it as part of their core reality. So now when you challenge it, you are challenging someone's reality and sometimes even their internal self. So they reject it, which we saw play out with Kirk. So people challenged it and went, no, that's actually not true. And they went, well, but Democrats were celebrating. So the truth doesn't matter because the effect is the same because the libs were celebrating. So therefore it is true, was kind of the logic that was happening. So they found a back door to defend this truth, even in the face of discrediting or information that discredited their reality. And this is just kind of like, it's like a little TLDR of how like hyper reality sort of works in regards to social media and algorithm. And I don't think we historians might go back and point out the truth, but I don't think mainstream media wise we're ever going to go back for Charlie Kirk, and I don't think mainstream media will ever really talk about it in a blunt way. Daily Show did. Daily Show actually did try to talk about both hyper reality, how it functions, and the truth around Kirk and the actors involved. But apart from that, I don't think we're going to get much. That particular truth is too it's too potent, I think, for powers that be and for propaganda to let go of fully. So they'll make that as muddy as possible because the narrative they wrote during that incident is very potent for them.
Okay, well, now we're going to switch topics entirely. Aliens come down to Earth and they land on your doorstep. Aliens come down to Earth, they land on your doorstep. And the only thing that they understand for this particular question and scenario is music.
Okay.
So what 3 albums or songs or a combination, but 3. But 3 albums or songs, if you want to introduce them to humanity, do you think would you play for them? She said, "Come in, sit down, have some tea."
Oh, that's a really good question. Well, okay, so probably Unreal Unearth by Hozier.
Okay.
I have a real bias towards that one. I really like that album. But I also think Hozier actually explores themes of resistance against colonization in particular within that album that I really like. And also utilizes the Irish language within that album. And I really think Unreal Unearth is great. He talks about war, trauma, the recovery of war, the decimation of colonization, and he covers some of these darker aspects of humanity, through his lens as an individual, also through a historical lens. And then the album kind of concludes with that spark of hope at the end that there can be rebuilding and recovery from this. And also like his exploration of grief, death, and reincarnation within the album I really like. So I would say Unreal Unearth for one of them. And then what else? What other album or songs? Okay, this is going to sound a little weird. The Epic of Gilgamesh. The Epic of Gilgamesh I would probably include because that is a song. It's a song. It's legit. It's a song.
Are you talking about Smurfs Gilgamesh?
That's Gargamel.
Oh, Gargamel. I'm over here like, did he have a theme song because villains do have theme songs in media. I'm like, I don't remember Gargamel having a theme song. Gargamesh, child, teach me, school me. Good Lord have mercy. Oh, the chat's having a nice little key at my expense. That's what I'm here for. Okay, so teach me and teach the chat. I know. I took him all the way out.
That was so good. That was so good. So it is one of our oldest surviving epics.
Okay, yes. The chat has Clap me
Yeah.
up. Thank you, chat.
Chat's on it already. Chat's like, we're sit down. It's time to go back to school. I know. She killed Kenny. I like put my little hood on.
Because I was like, I certainly don't have the foggiest idea what you're talking about. But okay, it's coming back to me now.
I wasn't aware that the Epic of Gilgamesh was considered a song. It is. And it actually, so Remmick's understanding of song and story is kind of connected to this. So if we're looking at, and this is what sort of betrays Remmick's age a little bit, is that if you're going back into the ancient world, songs and stories are interconnected. But this also could coincide with he's actually an Irish traveler theory as well. Even if accidentally became an Irish traveler, because the way that a lot of oral cultures and traditions, as we know, is we pass down stories and histories and survival methods through songs, because song is how we remember things. Rhythm and song is how you kind of store them within your body so that you don't forget them. And this was true for a lot of in the ancient world and in the classical world. This was how stories were preserved and performed, they were performed via poem and song. The griot tradition, exactly. So the Epic of Gilgamesh is a song, and it is meant to be performed as a song. And because it is one of our oldest and most well-preserved ancient songs, I feel like that is worth sharing. It is also people might come at me for this. I think it is our oldest BL for people who like BL and MLM content. I think it's our oldest BL because there is Boys Love. Look, Gilgamesh and Enkidu are a ship. They're a ship. They're the first ship.
Okay.
And if I am ancient Yowie is what I want to expose the aliens to.
Okay.
So it was. Hang on, I was about to give y'all a lore drop you did not need about me and like my personal awakening when I first read the Epic of Gilgamesh and was like, wow, two men can love each other. Hey, but ancient Yowie is so funny. It is, and historically accurate. At least in my opinion. Nobody will convince me otherwise. Don't even try. So, but I believe Epic of Gilgamesh, just because it is, I think, a good introduction for the aliens as our first way of preserving ancient knowledge was through song. Our first method of community healing and historical preservation and all of that through the act of song, and how we store song, not just in the mind, but also in how it's written in our bodies. And so I think the Epic of Gilgamesh would be great for that. Also, maybe if I can convince an alien to become a Fujoshi through the Epic of Gilgamesh, I would consider that a huge success. I love Fujoshis. I know people disagree with that, but I guess that's another conversation for another time. I don't care. I love them. So, and then what is my last one? No, Mr. Foxwell. Sorry. I feel like whenever I say I love Fujoshis, it's like the people like do the no little German boy meme with me. Like, no little German boy, don't go near the Fujoshi. And I'm like, mein Gott, Pierre. Okay, and I'm trying to think of my last one. What is my last song? It's gotta be a traveler song, I feel like. Cause my bias and my little world. I'm pulling up my little catalog of traveler songs. The one that has been on my mind the most recently has been Blackbird, which is a really sort of quintessential traveler song. It is a bit of a bummer song. But it's all about traveling through the cycles of life, traveling through the cycle of your ancestral route, and it's the song is about a traveler woman who is hitting the road for the first time. So, like in old school traveler culture, it's not done so much anymore. But when a young man or a young woman leaves her family and goes to the road for the first time, has their own baratop, has their own or their own caravan, and is traveling by themselves, it can sometimes be a shock, and it can sometimes feel very lonely and isolating. Like there's a reason why we sort of reconvene around festivals, because sometimes traveling along our route separates us.
Mhm.
And there's even stories that I've shared before, like about the traveler and the moon, and why the moon always follows us and keeps us company in our isolation, when those periods happen. But the song is about a traveler who has hit a period of isolation and is praying to the blackbirds to shorten the road. And sometimes the lyrics will change depending on who's singing it to "Blackbird, show me the road." So it's about that aimless wandering with no clear destination. And I feel like that really, I mean, maybe this is not so much about the world, but you could maybe analyze it that way. But I lean on that song when I'm feeling particularly lost in new places. When I've realized that the road that I've chosen and the path that I've chosen is way too big for me to grapple with, that it's
Mm.
more than I expected. Is there a place where I can hear the song? There's an artist that actually she takes a lot of inspiration from traveler music, and I really like her rendition of Blackbird. So I will pull that up for you. But I don't know, I've leaned on that song whenever I felt lost, and I imagine if an alien were to come to Earth, they would probably be pretty lost themselves. So
Yeah.
so I feel like I would want to gift them that song as a form of comfort for them. So maybe not necessarily teaching them anything about the Earth, but maybe something that comforts them in their journey here, when
Mm.
the road is long and overwhelming and you can't quite see the pathway laid out before you.
Mhm.
But here I have the song right here, and I will share it for the chat. But yeah, so I guess those are my three.
Those are fantastic. We've got, the Looters are an eclectic, diverse bunch, and we all love music from anywhere and everywhere. And I'm always talking about my world music collection. And I can honestly tell you that I know for a fact that I don't have any music related to Ireland or Irish travelers in that. So I'm also gonna
Oh.
be definitely checking that out as well.
Well, if you ever want some Irish music recommendations, I've got you
I
covered.
will
There's
hit you up.
there's one song that you need to be a little careful of that's called "The Fairy's Lament," because the
Mm,
only time you can sing along with that song is if you truly believe the story attached to the song. So the story that's attached to the song "The Fairy's Lament" it's about a young man who is from an esteemed family of musicians, and he lives with his family on this like little like mini rock or island off the coast of Ireland. And this family is so well known for their music that like people come from all over whenever they make sure to play in the village. People come from all over just to hear them play. And one day, this young man is working on a new song with his fiddle, and the mist rolls in from off the coast, and he hears a voice singing along with his fiddling. And as he follows the voice and he continues to play just so that the voice continues to sing, he comes across the most beautiful woman that he has ever seen in his entire life. And the two of them make fast, fast friends. Their creativity sparks off of each other. And for a while, he doesn't make sure, for months, It's just him and his mysterious woman from the mist, and they are making music and other things and having a really great time. And they become very, very attached to one another. And as their relationship gets a little bit more serious, as his family and friends are like, why haven't you made sure? Why are you still out there in the family home on that rock? Like, why haven't we seen you? As the world starts to pull him from their little nest of creativity, they have a night together, with the mist rolling in, making music as they normally do. And when he wakes up the next day, he notices that the woman he fell in love with is gone. She's vanished, stole away in the night. No note, no nothing, just gone. And so he still does not come ashore. Instead, he stays on his rock. He still tries to make the music that they used to make, but he's mooning and caterwauling around the little rock, around the coast, playing his mournful little fiddle, hoping that he hears her voice again and finds her again. And one day, as he's mooning along the beach, the mist rolls in and he hears that familiar voice again. And so he takes his skipper out into the water, and the voice is singing a song that he has never heard before. And though her voice is familiar, though he knows who it is, he has never heard this song. And like they had done when they were together, he begins to play alongside her. And as the mist clears, the language around the words become clear to him. And she is explaining to him that she's sorry that she had to leave. But she is of the she's a fairy of the good people, and it was time for her to return home. And though the time they spent together was short, the songs they made will embed themselves into her soul forever. And so she is gifting him this one final song to share, to spread to anybody who would like to hear it, a song that represents their love, something unique that only she could gift her love. And he plays the song along with her, allows it to embed itself in his heart. And for the first time in months and months, nigh on maybe a year, he makes sure and begins to play this song to anyone who will listen. And the song is called The Fairy's Lament. And it's a very beautiful, very eerie sounding song. And it's very sweet. But the only time you can sing this song is if you truly believe that she gifted this to him. Believe in their love with your whole heart. This song is a curse. And you will definitely have a lot of painful breakups.
Wow. I was on the edge of my seat. I was hanging on every word.
I got stories.
Every word. Well, those are fantastic answers. Chat. Does the chat have any questions for the fantastic Mr. Foxwell or myself before we wrap up or get going? Mr. Foxwell, do you have any questions for me or the chat?
I feel like we covered so much.
I know we really did. We really did in 3.5 hours. Thank you for spending so much time.
No, thank you all so much for having me. Thank you for inviting me in. That was a brave move.
I mean, I'm feeling pretty good about it. Pretty good about it. Somebody wants to know if you have any ghost stories. Do you write any ghost stories?
Ooh, I do like to write ghost stories. But I actually have a free to read webtoon called No Such Thing. And I think it's fantastic, but it's very rooted in like Irish traveler folklore and also like, world folklore and things like that. Just kind of like a little bit blended, but very heavy on the traveler folklore. But so if you would like to read it, it is for free on Webtoon. You just go take a look at it.
Awesome.
But I do have ghost stories. I have a lot of stories about dead people. If you're wanting folk stories. There's a very good one about a coffin maker, but also takes place in Ireland. But it's about a coffin maker sometime around Samhain, and he was apparently making coffins that were portals, and he did not know this. And he quickly made friends with many of the dead. So every time someone, and this would have been This would have been around the time. I mean, a lot of ghost stories take place around the famine for good reason.
Fair
So
enough. Yeah.
this would have been around the time of the famine. And he was a very well-known coffin maker. He just had a knack for burying the dead. He made them look so pristine and so beautiful in their excellent lined caskets. So people from all around Ireland would try and get him to bury their loved ones. What he didn't know was that his knack for death was actually connected to an old Irish fairy, and each coffin he created was a portal to the other side. So every time he buried someone, they never quite stayed dead. And at some point, people were running to his shop and saying, "Oh my God, I saw my loved one the other day. Oh my God, I saw my loved one the other day. Oh my God, my loved one invited me to a party the other day. What kind of cursed magic is happening?" So he goes to the grave, to the cemetery, his local one, where he's buried a lot of his townsfolk. And he looks for the caskets, and he finds that all of the caskets are dug up and just laid wide open. So he starts following bits of body parts and pieces that have decayed and fallen off, the shambling corpses that have risen from their graves, and he comes across one of his more recent burials, which is a young woman. And she tells him, "Oh, well, we're inviting everyone to a party before the veil returns. We want all of our loved ones to know how much we care for them before we leave, before we leave and before we travel our final time to the other side. So that's why we've all dug ourselves out. We're all going to have a party." And of course, for our coffin maker, he spent so much time around the dead that he's relatively unfazed. He finds the party to be a nuisance more than a terror. And he goes, "Do I really have to go?" And she was like, "Look, if you deny an invitation from the dead, you surely will be cursed. So I will be seeing you at this party." And he's like, "Fine." And she's like, "And try to get our families to come." And he's like, "I'm not doing all of that." So he shows up one evening to where the party is located. And the party is located at the abandoned house of a very wealthy landlord in town that he had buried. And there is just opulence everywhere. There are the good people who are helping to host for the undead, and there are skeletons and shambling corpses all over, behaving exactly as they had behaved in life. And he was like, "Wow, this is actually pretty sick. Okay, very interesting. I'm not going to eat the food because I'm not an idiot. You don't eat the food of the dead." But overall, he has a fine time at this party. He also gets involved in a little bit of the drama because there was a man who had passed away to join his late wife, but he forgot to tell his wife that he had remarried. And the woman he remarried had also died of starvation. So the three of them, look, this party got messy. If you heard the full story, this story's long, okay? Because there are sordid affairs of the dead and the undead happening at this party. And our poor coffin maker is trying to make peace across all of these different unfinished issues across this party and across the dead. And he finally comes home after the party and he's like, "Well, thank God that's over. Tomorrow will be November 1st. The veil will hopefully return and I won't have to do this ever again." This is not so. Our poor introvert. So our poor introvert gets a knock on the door, and that knock on the door is a crow carrying an invitation, inviting him back for a second night. And the invitation says the same thing that the deceased young woman said, which was, "And if you deny an invitation from the dead, surely you will be cursed." And he's like, "I guess I have to go to this party." So he goes and he hauls his butt to the party, and there is another raucous evening of the dead and the undead. But now the neighbors are starting to complain because they are partying day and night. There is there's no rest for the wicked, no rest for the dead. They are living it up. And he's like, "Why will they not stop partying?" At some point, this goes on for about 3 days. He's like, "Why will they not stop partying?" I've solved their issues. I've gotten in their business. I've thrown down. I've partied hard. What is it going to take for them to rest? So he remembers what the young woman said at the very beginning. If you could have our families arrive, it would mean the most. So he goes, okay, so that was a necessity. She needs to be more straightforward, but whatever, she's dead. So he goes and he invites all of the family members to the party as well. And it is that evening when the living and the dead are partying together side by side, sharing food, having a laugh, embracing in the revelry of each other, saying their final goodbyes, that the next day all is quiet and the dead have placed themselves back into their coffins until the next year, when there will be surely another party. But this time, on the first night, on October 31st through November 1st, they will all celebrate together, so that when the sun rises on the second, the dead are peacefully returned to their rest. And I think that's one of my favorite Samhain stories, because it goes into sort of the Irish tradition of Samhain, which is that we make food for our loved ones, we set a plate, we make sure there is an empty chair at the dining table for them to sit in. We invite people over, we party hard, we light a candle in the window to invite their souls into our homes so that they can sit and celebrate alongside us, know that we are okay, know the goings on of the previous year, understand our plans for the next year. And that way, when they get a little celebration, a little food, and a little bit of peace of mind, they are ready to rest for the rest of it. And that is the story. That is a little Samhain story.
That's incredibly beautiful, actually, because it just speaks to the indigenous knowledge of death is not the end, and it's not the end of our relationship with the people that we love. It just represents a change in how that relationship manifests in the world. And I think it's actually quite beautiful to think that that kind of check-in, it's really kind of a check-in and a checking on us still here bound to life.
Yep.
So that they can rest for another year, I think is actually quite beautiful.
Yeah, I personally really like that tradition as well. And there's also like there's a whole thing too around reincarnation, and like there's a little muddiness about how the mechanics work, but I do
Yeah.
love that tradition. And I like the idea that part of the summoning ritual to bring your deceased loved ones or ancestors back to you on Samhain night or on November 1st. It's really because it's all the way through to midnight November 1st. But like, or when the sun comes up, however you tend to draw your mechanics. But the ritual for it is preparing their favorite foods. And it shares, I feel like this tradition has so much in common too with like the Muertos, which is like the Day of the Dead. I think it shares a lot in common with like other indigenous traditions where part of the summoning is you offer songs and you offer food and you offer their favorite food and their favorite songs. You light the candle in the window to guide them, and the smell of the food guides them as well. And if you have pets, all the better, because the pets will help them come through. You know, the reason why orange and black are things for Halloween is because for Irish people, orange and red are warding colors. So those are colors that keep the bad spirits out of the house and let the good spirits come into the house, because the food and the candle invites them in, and the color red and orange help keep the evil out. Because when you leave your windows open and the veil is thin, you could accidentally invite a lot of things in, including things that pretend to be your loved ones, but aren't really. So it's important, like, you know, but all of those like Halloween traditions, like guising and trick-or-treating, all of those are rooted in Samhain traditions. You know, because it's a community building holiday as well. And it's a grief holiday. So you're really supposed to come together, you and your community, throughout October 31st and November 1st.
Well, the chat already knows that I stripped on Halloween, so I didn't do that this year. I was half
You
naked, shaking my ass.
you partied hard. Look, you partied hard, okay? Those
I did.
ghosts, there was a ghost stripper next to you also throwing it back. She was there with you in solidarity. She was like, "Finally, somebody doing an activity that will summon me from my rest so I can also party."
I love this so much. I love this so much. Mr. Foxwell, thank you so much for coming on to Conversations with the Culture. I truly do hope that this is something that we can do again. And just, continue the conversation and the learning and the just kind of checking in. I think
Mhm,
one of the things that I try and provide on this channel is a space of sanity for nuanced conversation, that is safe for people who are real and down to get into it. And
mhm.
so I hope that you experienced that as well, while you were here. And like I said, I really hope that we can do it again in the future, because I think that your voice, I said this to you before in private, but your voice is special. Your voice is special. What you have to share is so interconnected with many of the things that we talk about, that we treasure and want to protect for ourselves as well. But we know we're not the only impacted people who have special and important voices and a historical knowledge and an ancestral culture that we want to protect but also share. So I just thank you so much. I appreciate folks, showing up today to participate in the conversation. I appreciate everybody in the replay gang. If you couldn't catch it live, you'll catch it on the replay. And um yeah, I can't thank you enough. This has truly been a wonderful way. I know, speaking for myself, it's been a wonderful way to spend a Sunday afternoon. So, yeah,
Oh,
thank
well,
you.
thank you so much for having me. I really do appreciate it a lot. You allowing me to speak and to info dump on all of these topics that I am very passionate about and also find important to open up. I think more blunt conversations on, but
Mhm,
and I appreciate that you feel that it is informative and also fun because my goal is not to ever be very judgmental about what people don't know, but like I want to be able to inform in a blunt way or in
mhm,
a straightforward way.
mhm.
When I can, and I appreciate you also letting me preach to the choir a little bit because I know most of this information you and your audience probably already are very familiar with. So, it does feel it feels very gracious that you've given me so much space to speak so much and at so much length. So, I appreciate y'all for offering me that, and I will pin that compliment of having a special voice right to my heart right there.
That's right. That's right.
And on my refrigerator.
That's right. Okay, so stay with me. Imma end the live stream and then just chat with you for about 5 minutes off air.
All right.
All right, chat. I will see you soon. Thank you all so much. Make sure you like this on your way out if you didn't like it on your way in. If you have 30 extra seconds, you could leave a comment in the main comment section or hype it up, all of those things so that more folks see it. Okay? Love you. Bye.